Chapter 575. The light from the stone monument shone on Qin Wentian, causing a phenomenon to manifest around him. Numerous illusory battle drums appeared, revolving around him. Boom, boom, boom. The humming sounds reverberated unceasingly throughout the heavens and earth. A powerful force gushed forth from the stone monument, abruptly smashing towards Qin Wentian. With a deafening boom, the battle drums shook the heavens, and a fearsome force permeated through Qin Wentian's body, causing him to groan in agony as he coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood. His entire person was flung through the air. Yi Lingshuang, Qin Zheng and the rest were standing together with Qin Wentian, yet they were all fine. The light from the stone monument only targeted Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian's long hair fluttered in the wind. His gaze was deep as he silently cursed the ox demon in his heart. Didn't they say that as long as he became the sole survivor, he would be able to obtain the treasures? Why did he still want to be beaten up? Damn ox! Qin Wentian roared in rage when he saw the light from the stone monument blasting towards him. He slammed his fist onto the battle drum in front of him. Boom! The sound of the drum shook the heavens as a gigantic palm imprint broke through the air, blasting towards the stone monument. When the palm imprint landed on the stone monument, the energy from the impact was directly devoured by it. The light from the stone monument was like a lingering spirit that refused to disperse, enveloping Qin Wentian's body, causing Qin Wentian's countenance to turn incredibly unsightly to behold. Boom! A surge of destructive energy gushed forth. It was actually an illusory palm imprint, causing Qin Wentian's eyes to widen in shock. What kind of demon-level existence was this stone monument? It could even reflect attacks? Qin Wentian was speechless. He could only unleash another explosive strike, ruthlessly blasting the illusory battle drum in front of him. A surge of destructive energy directly gushed into his body, causing him to cough out blood once more. This caused Qin Wentian to feel an impulse to curse out. "I will destroy you!" Qin Wentian roared furiously. His entire body glowed with a resplendent light as he rushed towards the stone steel. A blood-red halberd appeared, bringing with it a boundless destructive might as it landed on the stone steel. Dong dong dong. The light from the stone monument grew even stronger. Qin Wentian could feel the illusory battle drums around him vibrating nonstop. Waves of energy rushed into his body. Qin Wentian didn't know how many mouthfuls of blood he had vomited. His face turned pale, but the arrogance in his eyes was still there. He attacked the haunting stone monument crazily, getting injured crazily. Until one moment, the world was filled with the reverberation of the drums. The light from the battle drums suddenly disappeared, as if it had rushed into Qin Wentian's body. Boom! The huge stone tablet trembled, and then turned into a beam of light that pierced through the sky. It was filled with mysterious colors. Qin Wentian looked at all of this in astonishment, a look of disbelief on his face. Was it finally over? Wait, what is this? Qin Wentian's heart stirred, after which he closed his eyes and in his perception, a battle drum actually appeared in his body, fusing together with him. This? Qin Wentian was speechless. Was this the good stuff that the ox demon had promised him? He carefully probed his body. Although he was weak due to his injuries, he discovered that after being beaten up by the stone monument, the astral energy in his body, as well as the circulation of his blood and astral energy, had become even smoother. Not only that, his will of mandates seemed to have grown more refined. This battle drum should be a treasure similar to the hatchet in foster father's body, able to fuse together with it. Qin Wentian mused. After which, with an intention of his will, the light from the battle drums enveloped his entire body, as though he was surrounded by battle drums. Wentian, try to see if there's any amplification effect to your attacks. Yi Lingshuang was astonished when she saw this scene. She recalled that her father's hatchet was able to amplify his attacks. Qin Wentian's battle drum should be able to do so as well. Amichim. Qin Wentian nodded his head. After the battle drum entered his body, the suppression on his cultivation base was removed, returning him to his original cultivation base, the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper. But what was strange was that the cultivation bases of Yi Lingshuang and the others were still suppressed. Maybe because he became the only one here. It could be said that he had passed some of the tests of the immortal martial realm, and obtain the right to remove the suppression on his cultivation base. Qin Wentian lifted his palms and attacked. The sound of the battle drum echoed out as a terrifying palm imprint blasted out, causing Qin Wentian's heart to tremble. He nodded his head to Yi Lingshuang. Amplification effect. And I can sense that this battle drum is able to weaken the attacks of others. This is a divine weapon that can be used for both offense and defense. The suppression on your cultivation base has been removed as well. Yi Lingshuang's eyes flashed with joy. It's indeed removed, but the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper is still insufficient. I feel that I'm about to break through soon. Qin Wentian spoke. After experiencing the baptism of the battle drum and the stone monument, he could faintly sense that he was about to break through. Go ahead and cultivate then. We will stand guard for you. Chu Meng spoke. Qin Wentian nodded his head as he glanced at the direction where the stone monument was located. There was a pathway there, and if he passed through this pathway he would be able to continue advancing forward. However, Qin Wentian wanted to raise his cultivation base before he left this place. If not, it would be extremely difficult for him to deal with the other 80 medallions that had a higher cultivation base than him. Out of the 81 medallions he, at the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper, could be considered the weakest among them. The others were at the 8th or 9th level of Heavenly Dipper. There was no way he could win against them. Just like Gu Lufeng, one of the 8 error-suppressing geniuses. How tyrannical was he when he was at the 8th level of Heavenly Dipper? Hence, Qin Wentian hoped that before he clashed with the others, he would be able to increase his strength as much as possible. Only then would he have more confidence. Right. Qin Wentian directly nodded his head in agreement. After which, he found a place to sit down, and with a wave of his hand, numerous yuan meteor stones appeared as he started his cultivation. As for the others, they didn't forget to clean up the battlefield and collect the treasures left behind by the fallen experts. Among these people, there were quite a few heavens chosen. The amount of wealth they had on them would definitely be astonishing. The moment Qin Wentian entered a state of cultivation, he would completely forget himself. Nothing would be able to disturb him. The yuan fu in his body rumbled, emitting rumbling sounds akin to the roaring of the ocean. Chu Meng and the others exchanged glances as expressions of shock appeared on their faces. The movements of this fellow's cultivation were truly grand. Stepping into the celestial phenomenon realm is a watershed for one's strength. For some supreme heavens chosen, the constellations they manifested would be exceedingly shocking, pulling apart the gap between them and the rest. I wonder what kind of constellation Qin Wentian would manifest after he stepped into the celestial phenomenon realm. Yi Lingshuang silently mused. She was filled with anticipation for Qin Wentian's growth. After being together with Qin Wentian for a long period of time, Yi Lingshuang could faintly sense that this demon-level existence would definitely surpass her father, the human emperor. Qin Wentian, who was in a state of immersion, completely forgot the passage of time. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. At this moment, there were quite a few others who came here, but after they left, they all returned. Fan Lo and Ouyang Guangxing also appeared. Evidently, these people didn't appear earlier because they were trapped in the cavern of life and death or somewhere else. Among them, there was a silver-robed young man whose aura was extremely terrifying, exuding the aura of a 7th-level Heavenly Dipper sovereign. This caused Yi Lingshuang and the rest to feel fear in their hearts. They all knew that this floating bridge was extremely vast, and there were some strange places where as long as you were brave enough, you could barge into it. However, the number of people who barged into it was extremely few, and the number of people who returned alive was even fewer. There were also people like Qin Wentian who had already dispelled the suppression on their cultivation bases. That person merely cast a glance in the direction of Qin Wentian before continuing on his way, leaving via the only passageway. The rumbling sounds within Qin Wentian's body grew increasingly terrifying, and finally, on the 2nd day, he broke through to the next cultivation base. The instant he opened his eyes, Qin Wentian saw Fan Lo and Ouyang Guangxing. A smile appeared on his face. Luckily they were fine. You freak, you actually broke through to the 6th level of Heavenly Dipper. I barely made it out alive in the cavern of life and death, barely managing to break through to the 5th level. Ouyang Guangxing gloomily punched Qin Wentian. Not only that, Qin Wentian had also dispelled the suppression on his cultivation bases. As for what happened earlier, he had already heard from Yi Lingshuang and the rest. Fatty, I feel the pressure is too great. Fan Lu seriously mumbled, his words causing Qin Wentian to laugh. He didn't ask them what they had experienced in the Cavern of Life and Death, he merely stated, let's move out, let's see what we'll encounter later on. MHM. Everyone nodded their heads, as they continued on the path where the monument disappeared. Not too long after, they arrived at a door. I'll enter first. Fan Lu stepped forward, yet he directly slammed into the door, unable to enter. It can't be that strange, right? Fan Lu stated in a depressed tone. Let me try. Chu Mang stepped forward, but just like Fan Lu, a formless energy seemed to obstruct them, preventing them from advancing. Yi Lingshuang's gaze turned to Qin Wentian, as a strange light flashed in her eyes. No wonder some people returned earlier. Seems like only those who have dispelled the suppression on their cultivation bases would be able to exit. For the others, they have no choice but to remain here. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows. After which he stepped forward, and his body actually passed through the door without any obstruction. He could even clearly feel a surge of spatial energy. Fuck. Fan Li's eyes widened as he speechlessly stated. Seems like we have to go back and search for a way out. It's obvious that we didn't even manage to obtain an entrance ticket. Indeed, we have to go back. Qin Zheng stated in a low voice. Evidently, they needed to find a way to dispel the suppression on their cultivation bases before they could continue onwards. Yin Mingyi didn't reply. Her eyes were as cold as ever as she turned her head and departed the area. The others followed after her. As for Qin Wentian, after he passed through the door, he arrived at another location. This place was a gigantic square plaza, and there were already several silhouettes gathered there. With a single glance, Qin Wentian saw a total of 11 experts. Not only that, he was acquainted with quite a few of them. These people were gathered in front of a pagoda in the center of the plaza. From the top of the pagoda, beams of light continuously cascaded downwards, bringing with them a mysterious energy. The top of the pagoda was naturally pointed, and when Qin Wentian inclined his head, a blinding beam of light shot over, causing Qin Wentian to involuntarily raise his hands to shield his eyes. Sir Qin. A gentle voice drifted over. Qin Wentian shifted his hands away from his eyes as he turned his gaze in the direction of the voice. Once again, he saw a countenance that would cause one's heart to tremble. With a light smile and a single glance, it was as though it could cause one's heart to sink in. Xian'er. Qin Wentian nodded his head lightly. This person was none other than Lin Xian'er. Qin Wentian naturally understood when he saw the people here. He had already arrived at the same location as the others on the floating bridge. Among the 11 people here, he was acquainted with those who possessed the immortal martial medallion, and were one of the 81 heaven chosen. A cold gaze landed on him. Qin Wentian sensed it as he turned his gaze over. He only saw Lu Bingyu coldly glancing at him before shifting her gaze away. There were no fluctuations in her eyes at all. Hee, there's a path to heaven but you don't want to walk it. There's no gate to hell but you insist on barging in. An arrogant voice drifted over. This time around, Qin Wentian saw a silhouette filled with a wild demonic qi. It was none other than the saint child of the supreme demon sect. Those who came here were all heavy-tier heaven chosen. Chapter 576. Qin Wentian didn't feel surprised. Since he had entered the immortal martial realm, he was destined to clash with these people. In the previous battles on the floating bridges, the 81 medallion holders were all on different bridges. But regardless of the test of the Black Jiao Python, the test of the Ox Demon, the Cavern of Life and Death, or even the Battle Drum battlefield, all of them were filled with the danger of death. The immortal martial realm was known as the burial ground of geniuses. Now that he had exited the floating bridges, the truly fascinating battles had just begun. Qin Wentian's gaze paused on the saint child of the supreme demon sect for an instant before shifting his eyes away, staring at the top of the conical pagoda. Gradually, he grew familiar with that blinding light. Yet Qin Wentian still couldn't see clearly what was within that beam of light. It was extremely blinding, and all he could see was a beam of intense light. Could this be an even more powerful treasure? Qin Wentian silently mused. Sir Qin, can you guess what's up there? Lin Xian'er smiled. Xian'er, you came first. Could it be that you don't know? Qin Wentian curiously asked. Lin Xian'er shook her head, her lips twitching as she replied. This pagoda is extremely sinister. It's basically impossible to touch the object at the top from the outside. I'm afraid there's only one way to know. Climb up the pagoda step by step, climbing to the highest peak. Only then would there be a chance. An expression of bewilderment flashed past Qin Wentian's face when he heard this. He seriously stared at the light cascading down from the top of the pagoda. Indeed, the entire pagoda seemed to be enveloped by a layer of silvery light. Since these people didn't move, it was obvious that this pagoda wasn't so easy to ascend. How do I ascend the pagoda? Qin Wentian asked. It's very simple. You just have to walk up the tower. However, young Master Qin, you must be prepared before you ascend the tower. This is because the moment you take the first step, the others will follow you. At that time, their attacks will be directed at young Master Qin, Xian'er said. Her voice was gentle, and she explained in detail. Only then did Qin Wentian notice that the 11 geniuses before him were all maintaining the same posture. Not a single one of them moved. They all stood there quietly. It was obvious that they had fought before and were all waiting for the right time. Although the saint child of the supreme demon sect had killing intent towards him, he didn't move and merely stood quietly at his original location. Since I'm already here, I should at least give it a try. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with a strange light. After that, he stepped forward and walked towards the pagoda in front of him. The pagoda was very tall. The moment Qin Wentian stepped onto the edge of the pagoda, the other 11 prodigies moved at the same time. Not knowing the immensity of death, the saint child of the supreme demon sect coldly snorted as a towering demonic qi gushed forth from him. Qin Wentian entered the light cascading down from the top of the pagoda. The resplendent light cascaded down on him. Yet it caused Qin Wentian to feel an endless pressure. There was a flight of stairs at the edge of the pagoda. With a single step, he directly ascended the pagoda. At the instant he ascended, the other 10+ people also did the same. At this moment, Qin Wentian discovered that he could actually see the silhouettes of all the geniuses in the pagoda with a single glance. All 11 of them were clearly reflected in his vision. Sir Qin, be careful. Here, any attack you launch will hit everyone at the same time. It's the same for the attacks of the others as well. As the sound of Lin Xian'er's voice faded, Qin Wentian saw the saint child of the supreme demon sect unleashing his attack. That was a blood-colored palm imprint that contained an incomparably violent demonic energy. The palm imprint shone with blood-colored runic light as it bore down on Qin Wentian, containing an intense destructive might. In just an instant, it had already arrived before Qin Wentian, slamming down towards him. Not only for Qin Wentian, at this moment, all the other geniuses were suffering from the same attack. When the saint child of the supreme demon sect unleashed his attack, it would simultaneously attack the other 11. Qin Wentian's palms glowed with a blood-colored light. Lifting his palms, he blasted out a palm imprint. An explosive sound rang out as the palm imprints collided with each other. An immense pressure bore down on Qin Wentian's arm, and although it dissipated, it still caused Qin Wentian's arm to tremble slightly. However, this was only the beginning. Qin Wentian had just defended against this attack, when he discovered a dazzling saber light slashing down. This saber light was as fast as lightning, slashing down from the middle of his body. The coldness of the saber light was so cold that it seemed as though it wanted to cleave him into two. Qin Wentian's eyes narrowed. He lifted both his palms and blasted out in the air. The saber light slashed down, shattering the palm imprint, but the saber light also dissipated. However, this was far from the end. Qin Wentian finally understood why Lin Xian'er had warned him to be careful. Next, 4 to 5 consecutive attacks blasted over, causing Qin Wentian's blood and qi to churn wildly. There was no way for him to stop, because at the same time he was enduring the attacks, everyone else was suffering the same as him. If they wanted to neutralize the attacks, they could only do so. The weakest among them would definitely be the first to be eliminated. A thought flashed through Qin Wentian's mind. Before him, was there someone else who had already been killed? Although there were no corpses here, one must know that if the attacks of these geniuses landed perfectly, there would definitely be no corpses left. Sir Qin, be careful. A clear voice rang out. After that, Qin Wentian saw Lin Xian's silhouette entering his sea of consciousness. The melody of a zither rang out, resonating in his heart. Amidst this killing intent, it actually caused one to feel a sense of joy in the heart and the soul. Amidst the melody, a killing note abruptly blasted out, aiming for his throat. Despite Lin Xian's warning, Qin Wentian's reaction was still delayed for a moment. The ancient halberd in his hands slashed out, shattering the note. After which, the ancient halberd whistled out once more, and with a piercing sound, Lin Xian's silhouette vanished from sight. You are still not dead. A howl of rage rang out, causing everyone's eardrums to tremble violently. It felt as though there were millions of demonic beasts pressing down on them. Qin Wentian saw the silhouette of the saint child of the supreme demon sect vanishing from his original location, rushing towards all of them, as well as Qin Wentian. Kill! The silhouette of the saint child of the supreme demon sect enlarged before Qin Wentian's eyes, transforming into a giant that towered up into the skies. Punching out, a blood-colored light flashed frenziedly, as though there were millions of blood-colored demonic wolves rushing towards Qin Wentian. Each and every one of the demonic wolves had blood-colored eyes, and the way they stared at people caused their hearts to tremble in fear. Everyone frenziedly clashed against the saint child of the supreme demon sect. The flames of their battle ignited. A surge of blood-colored demonic qi gushed forth from Qin Wentian, soaring up into the skies, enveloping his entire person within. Qin Wentian's physique also grew taller, resembling a descendant of an ancient demon king. His eyes were incomparably lofty, capable of penetrating through the hearts of others. In the center of his brows, there was a vertical eye that shot out a terrifying demonic light. Wielding a gigantic blood-colored ancient halberd, Qin Wentian's arms were clad in demonic armor. The fiend transformation art had fully equipped him. The gigantic blood-colored halberd trembled, bringing with it a boundless might. Qin Wentian's ancient halberd slashed out in the air. Everywhere the ancient halberd landed, the space around it trembled violently. The blood-colored demonic wolves were all annihilated one after another. This halberd strike contained a blood-colored frenzy, shattering all the attacks in front of him. Sir Qin's strength has grown stronger again. Lin Xian's voice was gentle. She sat down and strummed her zither, as though she was preparing to take a defensive stance instead of continuing to attack. Beside Qin Wentian, Lu Bingyu moved. It was as though she was standing in the center of the pagoda. Snowflakes drifted down as a surge of ice-sealing energy gushed forth, swiftly freezing the entire space. Qin Wentian shivered involuntarily as he stared at the ice-cold silhouette wielding a sharp sword. She was like a proud and aloof plum blossom, blooming proudly in the midst of extreme snow and ice. She was Lu Bingyu, the favorite disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. Qi. Not only did Qin Wentian feel cold, he could also sense the sword qi. This sword qi seemed to have melted into the snow and ice in the air, fusing into the drifting frigid wind, slashing at his body, wanting to break through his defenses. Yet from the start till now, Lu Bingyu merely stood quietly in the center. She had yet to unleash her attack. Busy. Lu Bingyu's hand moved. Her sword gleamed with a cold light akin to the winter snow. The drifting snowflakes in the air all exuded an intense killing intent. A sword slashed out. This sword was so cold and aloof, just like Lu Bingyu herself. Qin Wentian only saw Lu Bingyu's silhouette piercing towards him, causing the snowflakes in the air to swirl about. The snowflakes transformed into a vortex, unceasingly piercing towards his body. Each snowflake was like a sharp sword, destroying his defenses. Qin Wentian couldn't see the sword light anymore. He could only see the snowflake vortex rushing towards him. These snowflakes were as sharp as swords. Qin Wentian stepped out as the ancient halberd once again stabbed out explosively. This halberd strike was formless, penetrating through the snowflake vortex. When the blood-colored ancient halberd came into contact with the snowflakes in the air, a terrifying pulsating energy gushed forth in all directions, shattering the snowflakes in the air as it collided head-on with the absolute killing sword in the vortex. The ancient halberd froze as cracks appeared on its surface. With a deafening bang, the ancient halberd completely shattered. But at the same time, the sword also shattered. The disciple that the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness values the most is truly extraordinary. Qin Wentian silently mused. This sword strike wasn't the strongest attack of his opponent. He himself had held back, but so did his opponent. However, one of them couldn't hold on any longer and died under Lu Bingyu's sword. His body lightened. Qin Wentian felt the pressure from the pagoda vanishing. After which, he saw the other participants stepping up into the air at the same time. With one eliminated, they would be one step closer to the top of the pagoda. Qin Wentian similarly stepped up into the air. Staring at the dazzling white light, as well as the silk threads descending from above, he couldn't help but feel shock in his heart. Only 11 heaven-chosen remained. Was it destined that only one person would be able to walk to the top? The immortal martial realm had layers upon layers of selections, and the demon-level geniuses that emerged were all extremely terrifying existences that could suppress all heaven-chosen. In that case, what was the ultimate goal of the immortal martial realm? Could it be that the rumors in the royal sacred region were true? Immortals' inheritances? The immortal martial realm had immortals. Chapter 577. Qin Wentian stably took a step forward as he inclined his head and stared at the dazzling white beam of light in the air. If he wanted to ascend to the peak, he had to trample all the other geniuses beneath his feet. He wouldn't show any signs of weakness or hesitation. Qin Wentian was very clear that this wasn't the final step. There were still other geniuses fighting in other places that he didn't know of. If he couldn't even ascend to the peak here, it would mean that he had become a stepping stone for others. How would he answer to those brothers who sent him here? The immortal martial realm was a burial ground for geniuses, a place where only 9 out of 10 people survived. If one couldn't become one of the most dazzling geniuses, everything they did would be meaningless. When the people of the royal sacred region looked up to the most dazzling geniuses, they would occasionally mention him, Qin Wentian. They would only remember that a certain genius had trampled on him, Qin Wentian, to obtain glory. It's just that if I continue fighting like this, even if I manage to ascend to the peak, the astral energy in my body would be completely depleted. Qin Wentian gradually got used to the unceasing white beam of light. After that, he seriously surveyed the remaining 11. Any one of them was more outstanding compared to Keicheng and Shinting. If not, they wouldn't have been able to reach this step. After taking a step towards the top of the pagoda, everyone tactfully stopped their attacks. Everyone knew very well that once someone started to attack, unless someone was eliminated, the battle would not stop. Since none of you are willing to act, Xian will play a tune for all of you. Lin Xian gently spoke. After which she strummed her zither and started playing. The melody was still as gentle as ever. Beams of illusory light radiated from her zither. And not long after, everyone was brought into her illusionscape. Sir Qin, we meet again. Lin Xian once again appeared in front of Qin Wentian. The situation was so similar to back then in the Immortal Ripple Pavilion. This time around, I'm afraid I have to offend you. Qin Wentian's voice was calm. There were no fluctuations to it at all. It was as though he was thinking back to that beautiful night. The moonlight cascading down on Lin Xian's silhouette. The melody of the zither lingered in the air. How beautiful it was. Lin Xian didn't act like the rumors, seducing others. From that gentle smile of hers, one could feel the pride in her heart. She who was as tranquil as still water was like a lofty yet gentle phoenix, waiting for someone to sing with her. Qin Wentian's impression of Lin Xian wasn't bad. Not only because she had spoken up for him and offended the saint child of the supreme demon sect, it was also because her radiant smile was so pleasing to the eye. However, since they were both going to ascend the tower, they were destined to compete. Xian will also treat it seriously. Of course, if anyone can break free from the illusion and attack first, it will be a huge threat to the others. Lin Xian intentionally or unintentionally spoke. Her words were undoubtedly reminding Qin Wentian that right now, He had been dragged into an illusionscape by Lin Xian'er's zither melody. Although he had yet to break free, if the others managed to break free, they would all be in danger. Be careful. Qin Wentian spoke. The ancient halberd appeared in his hand. Qin Wentian stared at Lin Xian'er's many clones, and his silhouette flickered, transforming into a series of afterimages as he stabbed out with his ancient halberd. Piercing sounds rang out unceasingly as Lin Xian'er's clones were destroyed one after another. The zither melody drifted over from all directions. Each and every one of Lin Xian'er's clones were capable of strumming the zither strings, using the zither melody to attack. The white light radiating from the zither melody was akin to resplendent blades, containing a sharpness capable of reaping lives. Although Sir Qin's strength has increased, Xian'er's isn't stagnant either. Lin Xian'er's voice drifted over. Her clones were destroyed and then reborn. This was originally an extremely powerful illusionscape, where everything was illusory and real. Who could tell what was real and what was fake? The silky threads formed from the zither melody were like a formless silver net of slaughter, enveloping Qin Wentian within as they unceasingly shot towards Qin Wentian. Illusion. Qin Wentian thought back to his previous confrontation with Lin Xian'er. Maybe he wouldn't even be able to find her true body. Did he really defeat her back then? Maybe. The murderous melody slammed into Qin Wentian's body, pulling him out from the illusionscape. Lin Xian'er was still quietly playing the zither. Her eyes were tightly shut. Her long eyelashes fluttered slightly, wanting to break free from the illusionscape she created. She knew that if one of them managed to break free from the illusionscape, then Qin Wentian's attacks wouldn't only be a threat to others, but also to her. The blood-colored ancient halberd in his hands radiated a dazzling light. Qin Wentian dashed out as the ancient halberd in his hands exploded outwards. In that instant, the eyes of everyone abruptly snapped open, as an intense cold light gleamed in their eyes. Qin Wentian's true body was clearly still standing at his original location, but at this instant, everyone felt as though they were inches away from him. The others also had the same feeling. Qin Wentian's ancient halberd directly appeared before them. This was one of the strangest aspects of the pagoda battle. At the instant Qin Wentian unleashed his attack, everyone started to defend. This meant that both Lin Xian'er and Qin Wentian were attacking them at the same time. Instantly, many of them broke out in cold sweat. When one of them launched an attack, they would always choose to defend because before Qin Wentian arrived, they had already tested it out. When the two of them launched their attacks would be directly targeted at each other instead of being targeted at everyone else. This was clearly an extremely dangerous action. When their attacks landed, they would be countered by someone else, and would instantly be forced into a passive state. But this time around it was different. Because Lin Xian'er's attack was broken by Qin Wentian, but they weren't. They were still in the process of enduring the attacks while Qin Wentian launched his own attack. Lu Bingyu, who was at the side, radiated an incomparably sharp aura. She slashed out like a beam of light, disintegrating Qin Wentian's attack. The saint child of the supreme demon sect howled in rage, wanting to transform into a demon. The power he blasted out was akin to the howling of 10,000 demons, breaking apart Qin Wentian's attack. However, not everyone was as strong as Lu Bingyu and the saint child of the supreme demon sect. A piercing sound rang out as the ancient halberd directly penetrated through the throat of one of them. He stared at the silhouette of Qin Wentian in front of him as a venomous expression flashed on his face. A beam of light cascaded down as the pressure vanished once more. Qin Wentian stood at his original location, his countenance gleaming with sharpness. This was the first time he took the initiative to attack. In that instant earlier, he actually felt as though he was fighting against everyone alone. This feeling was extremely marvelous. Boom! Everyone lifted their feet and continued advancing up the pagoda. Every time someone was eliminated, they would be able to ascend to the next level. This time around, everyone was even more cautious than before. After the earlier exploration, they had a clearer understanding of the rules of combat in this pagoda. It was very interesting, but also very dangerous. Diagonally opposite to Qin Wentian was a man clad in luxurious robes. His body radiated an extremely dangerous fiery aura. Yet from the start till the end, he had yet to launch an attack. But just from the way he defended against Qin Wentian's attack earlier, one could already see how terrifyingly powerful this man was. He had always been waiting for an opportunity, and was hiding among the crowd. The person beside Lin Xian was also extremely powerful. His eyes flickered with a brown light, causing people to feel a sense of terror. He was the same as the young man in luxurious robes he had yet to act. These two, the saint child of the supreme demon sect, Lin Xian and Lu Bingyu, were the 5 people that Qin Wentian felt posed the greatest threat to him. Since none of you want to reveal your true strength, I shall force you all to do so. Qin Wentian stepped forth as his sword-type astral nova erupted forth. A tyrannical sword intent gushed forth, instantly enveloping everyone. They could sense that Qin Wentian was currently walking towards them. Boom! Qin Wentian's feet stomped down. Every step he took contained a sword intent akin to a myriad of heart-piercing swords. Qin Wentian's eyes were as sharp as swords, and the astral nova floating around him also emitted a resplendent sword humming sound, unceasingly pressing down. Boom boom. Every step he took, the sword chi grew stronger and stronger. Everyone was seriously resisting, because they could clearly sense that the sword intent was still growing stronger. It was as though their entire bodies were enveloped by a terrifying sword chi, pressing down on their hearts. The might of the 7 Annihilations swordplay grew more and more terrifying. At the instant Qin Wentian's 7th step landed, the entire pagoda was enveloped by a towering sword might. Everyone was frenziedly resisting it. However, nobody noticed that at the instant Qin Wentian's 7 Annihilations swordplay landed, the young man who had been silent all this while suddenly acted. His grasp of timing was extremely precise. At the instant his palms entered the pagoda, beams of blood-colored light radiated from his palms, blasting towards those who were still resisting the 7 Annihilation swordplay. Qin Wentian felt an intense sense of danger when he saw the blood-colored light speeding towards him. Fast, too fast, so fast that he couldn't even react in time. Qin Wentian could only attack with the remaining might of his sword chi, sweeping towards the blood-colored light. Fortunately, the attack power of the blood-colored light seemed to be very weak. When it came close to Qin Wentian, it was erased by the sword light. However, some people weren't so lucky. The blood-colored light actually rushed into the bodies of 4 people at the same time. A scream was heard. Qin Wentian looked in the direction of the scream, and saw the vitality of one person instantly wither away. Very soon his face turned ashen. No! Another person roared. Qin Wentian felt the pressure on his head loosen. He took a step up, and then the pressure loosened again because a second person had died. He once again moved towards the top of the pagoda. Qin Wentian took 4 consecutive steps and stared blankly at the 4 geniuses below who had lost their vitality. All of them had the same characteristic. After they died, a brown poisonous scorpion appeared on their bodies. Those who were still alive felt their scalps go numb as they stared at the figure. Sky Poison Valley, Poison Scorpion. Lin Xian's beautiful eyes changed as she stared at the brown-eyed young man. Fear still lingered in her heart. She didn't know his real name, and in fact, very few people had seen him before. She only knew that there were a few extremely dangerous geniuses from the Sky Poison Valley in this generation. And this poison scorpion was one of them. There's still 6 people left. This is much more comfortable. Poison Scorpion's voice was low. He inclined his head and glanced upwards. They had already arrived at the center of the pagoda. The light cascading down from above grew increasingly resplendent, causing a bright light to flash in Poison Scorpion's eyes. Were they nearing their target? Chapter 578. There were only 6 people remaining on the pagoda. They were Qin Wentian, Lu Bingyu, Lin Xian, the saint child of the supreme demon sect, Poison Scorpion, as well as the young man clad in luxurious robes whom Qin Wentian had noticed earlier. Qin Wentian cast a deep glance at Poison Scorpion. Indeed, as he had expected, the remaining people were all extremely dangerous characters. The Sky Poison Valley was one of the 9 great sections. Since this brown-eyed young man was able to cause Lin Xian's expression to change, he naturally had his own terrifying aspects. Not only that, he had already displayed to everyone how dangerous he was. That's right. Although he had only acted once, and it wasn't even a frontal attack but a poison attack, this caused everyone to feel even more trepidation. The more dangerous a person was, the more fatal they would be. He was able to kill people without even noticing, and earlier, he had already killed 4 powerful Heaven Chosen. If they were to fight against each other, they would have to experience countless rounds of intense battles before they could eliminate those 4. Indeed, I feel much more comfortable now. As the sound of Poison Scorpion's voice faded, the young man in luxurious robes continued to speak. His deep eyes seemed to contain a dangerous aura of destruction as he swept his gaze across the other 5. Every single one of them wanted to get a clear idea of who their enemies were. To them, aside from themselves, everyone else was an enemy. I have a suggestion. Why don't we make an agreement? Starting from a certain person, we will take turns to fight, allowing him to fight to his heart's content. The others are not allowed to interfere, and we will see who will be blasted off the pagoda. How about it? The gaze of the young man in luxurious robes lingered on Lu Bingyu for a moment. Can you guarantee that the others will follow the agreement? What if there are people scheming against us? Lin Xian gently asked, as she glanced at Poison Scorpion who was beside her. That would require everyone to be more careful. For example, if I'm in a state of constant attack, if there are people scheming against me, I would be the only one fighting against them. But the moment I stop, you guys have to be on your guard. Don't be like earlier, getting bitten by a poisonous scorpion. The young man in luxurious robes casually laughed. Naturally, if there are people who don't wish to initiate an attack, they can choose to skip it. I don't have any objections. A strange glint flashed in Poison Scorpion's brown eyes, causing the crowd to laugh coldly in their hearts. Of course he wouldn't have any objections. In terms of sneak attacks, Poison Scorpion of the Sky Poison Valley should be the most proficient. The others were all on guard against him. At least this way, the battle wouldn't be so chaotic. I have no objections. The Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect was extremely confident in his own strength, hence he agreed. Since all of you have put it this way, Xian can only agree. However, if Xian is truly not a match for them, I hope that you can show mercy and at the very least give Xian a chance to escape. Even if I miss this chance and have no way to enter the pagoda again, Xian can only accept it. The smile on Lin Xian's face caused the hearts of those who saw it to stir. It was truly hard for them to kill such a beautiful woman. Lin Xian's display of weakness caused the crowd to feel extremely puzzled. Earlier, those who were defeated had all died. There was no chance for them to escape. The reason why Lin Xian could say such words was because she was a female, causing people to not mind it that much. If it was the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect, it would be impossible for him to say such humiliating words. But naturally, there was another reason. It would cause people to look down on her. Qin Wentian smiled, tacitly agreeing. Lu Bingyu didn't say anything, she was as cold as ever. She didn't deny nor reject. Since this is the case, let me be the first to attack. The young man in luxurious robes still had a faint smile on his face. However, the aura radiating from him caused people to feel an increasing sense of danger. He lifted his palms as a scorching heat instantly gushed forth, bringing with it the power of annihilation. He stretched his hands out and pressed them into the pagoda. Instantly, his attack blasted towards the crowd. The crowd only felt the silhouette of the young man in luxurious robes appearing before their eyes, launching an attack directly at them. Qin Wentian lifted his palms and blasted them towards the incoming attack. However, he only saw the lips of his opponent curling up in a cold smile. A violent surge of flames erupted forth as a pair of blood-colored flaming wings appeared on his back. A fearsome heat gushed forth, and as he pressed his palms downwards, Qin Wentian could see numerous blood-colored phoenixes flying towards him, exuding boundless might. Qin Wentian's blood surged as a blood-colored light towered up into the skies. His body was clad in demonic armor as he blasted out with his arms, colliding head-on with the sharp claws of the blood-colored phoenix. He only felt his arms trembling violently from the impact. Phoenix cries resounded through the 9 heavens. His opponent spat out streams of black-colored flames. Each of the flames was like a flower of destruction, containing a fearsome killing might. Qin Wentian blasted out with both his palms at the same time, causing rumbling sounds of his palms to shatter the heavens and earth, clashing violently against the descending fireballs. Just like what they had agreed. The young man in luxurious robes continued to unleash attacks while the other 5 were defending. However, the young man in luxurious robes was only one person. It was impossible for his attacks to target all 5 of them at the same time. He could only target one person at a time, and the one who was having the hardest time facing his attacks was none other than Lu Bingyu. This was because the young man in luxurious robes was clearly targeting her defense, and was constantly adjusting his attacks. The young man in luxurious robes was proficient in fire-attributed energy, while Lu Bingyu was proficient in ice. Fire and frost collided, and their battle was the most intense. The young man in luxurious robes was surnamed Li. He was a heaven chosen from the Li clan in the southern domain of the royal sacred region, Li Hantian. He was also the elder brother of the personal disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness, Li Hanyu. He knew that Lu Bingyu was the senior apprentice sister of his younger sister, and was even more highly regarded by the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness compared to his younger sister, Li Hanyu. In addition, back then when they fought in Yi country, the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness snatched away Yi Qingyun's treasure and gave it to Lu Bingyu. And now, Li Hantian actually wanted to determine who was superior and who was inferior to Lu Bingyu. Have you had enough? A cold voice rang out from Lu Bingyu's mouth, containing a hint of killing intent, causing those who heard it to involuntarily shiver. The anger of a beauty is actually so moving. Li Hantian teased. The coldness radiating from Lu Bingyu grew stronger and stronger, faintly exuding an aura that could freeze mountains and rivers. The entire space started to freeze, and a terrifying coldness gushed forth from Lu Bingyu's body. She then spoke. Since you want to fight, I shall grant you your wish. As the sound of her voice faded, Lu Bingyu stepped out, as though she had also rushed into the pagoda. At this moment, the pressure on Qin Wentian and the others abruptly vanished. They only saw 2 silhouettes within the pagoda's glow. These 2 silhouettes were none other than Lu Bingyu and Li Hantian. Lu Bingyu was evidently enraged. She unsheathed her sword. The coldness radiating from it was akin to a sword of ice. As the sword manifested, the frost within 1,000 miles transformed into snow. Sword Qi danced in the air as the phoenix bathed in flames was covered in a layer of frost. Li Hantian's countenance drastically changed. At this moment, he actually felt an overwhelming might radiating from Lu Bingyu. He knew that he had still underestimated this woman. She was the most favored disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. Lu Bingyu's sword pierced out, dispelling the frost within 1,000 miles. This sword strike of hers was more than twice as powerful as the one she used earlier. Li Hantian wanted to retreat, yet he only saw the gigantic frost sword extending out, slashing apart the blood phoenix. Just when Li Hantian wanted to retreat from the pagoda, the sword slashed apart his body. But before blood could flow out, his body had already been frozen solid. Another Heaven's Chosen had fallen. The battle sword sect had the strongest individual combat prowess among the 9 great sections. Although it was impossible for every disciple to be the strongest, the average strength of those outstanding disciples could indeed suppress the other sections. Although this Lu Bingyu wasn't as famous as the era-suppressing genius Ji Feishue, just based on the magnificence of that sword strike, she shouldn't be too far off. Not only that, everyone also knew that within her body, the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness had obtained the human emperor's treasure for her. Lu Bingyu retracted her sword, and stood at her original location from the start till the end. But earlier, the spectators had clearly seen the battle between her and Li Hantian within the pagoda. This was the marvelous aspect of the pagoda. The remaining 5 took another step forward, getting closer to the top of the pagoda. However, the hearts of the spectators were extremely heavy because the remaining opponents were getting stronger and stronger. It's your turn, Poison Scorpion. The saint child of the Supreme Demon Sect spoke. Poison Scorpion's brown eyes swept over everyone as he launched his attack. A gust of fishy wind gushed over, causing Qin Wentian to instantly hold his breath. At the same time, a screen of swords appeared around him, dissipating the poisonous gas. The fishy wind continued gushing out, causing the vision of the spectators to gradually turn blurry. Qin Wentian stared at the fishy wind in front of him as he furrowed his brows. After which, he saw a gigantic scorpion king clad in armor, swinging its tail straight at him. Is this poison scorpion a human or a demon? The hearts of the spectators trembled. A blood-colored ancient halberd appeared in Qin Wentian's hands as he violently smashed it towards the scorpion's tail. At the instant of impact, the scorpion's tail was directly shattered into pieces. Droplets of fresh blood gushed out, shooting towards Qin Wentian with lightning speed. Qin Wentian's left hand swiftly blasted out a palm strike, slapping away the droplets of blood. However, that poisonous scorpion continued getting closer and closer, stabbing towards him. This caused Qin Wentian to hesitate. After which, a cold glint of light flickered in his eyes as the ancient halberd pierced forwards. Piercing sounds rang out as the venomous scorpion was torn apart. Drops of fresh blood gushed out, transforming into a rain of blood. Qin Wentian waved his hand, and instantly, a blood-colored light filled with a destructive current soared up into the air, engulfing the rain of blood. How dangerous! Qin Wentian silently mused. The blood of this poisonous scorpion was something he mustn't touch. At this moment, a cold and sinister beam of light shot over, causing Qin Wentian's heart to tremble violently as a sense of extreme danger rose in his heart. This isn't right. A crisp sound rang out as that sense of danger vanished. After which, Qin Wentian saw two silhouettes clashing within the pagoda. So it turned out that earlier when the saint child of the Supreme Demon Sect wanted to launch a sneak attack, he was intercepted by Lin Xian. Previously, I've always wanted to spar with Fairy Lin. Now it's the perfect time. The saint child of the Supreme Demon Sect laughed as the two of them clashed. Me too. Another voice rang out. Poison Scorpion actually rushed into the battlefield, shooting out a beam of blood-colored light towards Lin Xian, turning the situation into a chaotic battle between the three of them. The two of you are bullying a weak girl like Xian. Isn't this a little too ungentlemanly? Lin Xian's beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light. She was preparing to leave the battlefield, but she soon discovered that she couldn't do so. It was as though the moment she entered this battle, she would never be able to leave. Chapter 579. Lin Xian softly spoke. Her jade-white skin seemed to be able to wring water out of it. Her demeanor was so soul-stirring that although it wasn't seductive, it was enough to intoxicate one to the bone. There would be people who would want to protect her with all their heart, but there would also be those who were extremely aggressive. The more they saw her, the more they wanted to tear her apart, ravaging her mercilessly to see if she was truly made of water. The saint child of the Supreme Demon Sect naturally had such a thought. Back then Lin Xian had humiliated him for the sake of Qin Wentian. Ever since then, he had thought of pressing this woman beneath his body to enjoy the pleasures of the saint child. When this number one beauty of the royal sacred region was subdued, what sort of state would she be in? Is Fairy a weak woman? Back then in the Immortal Ripple Pavilion, Fairy was extremely domineering for the sake of a wild man, even allowing him to enter her room. I wonder if he made Fairy happy that night? The saint child of the Supreme Demon Sect didn't even glance at Qin Wentian who was beside him. It was as though the person he was talking about had nothing to do with Qin Wentian at all. If he can't do it, I'm more than willing to subdue Fairy. You haven't asked for my opinion yet? Poison Scorpion's brown eyes flashed with a hint of lust. Such a beauty. Even he couldn't help but feel a trace of arousal. We won't harm her life, we will only cripple her cultivation base. As for who will be able to subdue her, we will have to see who among the two of us can walk to the end. The saint child of the Supreme Demon Sect faintly spoke. The two of them exchanged glances, as though they had come to a mutual understanding. Upon hearing their conversation, despite Lin Xian's self-restraint, she couldn't help but feel a chill radiating from her. Her countenance was as cold as frost, and her beautiful eyes grew sharper and sharper. Such an appearance caused the evil light in the eyes of Poison Scorpion, and the saint child of the Supreme Demon Sect to grow even more intense. A bright light flashed as Lin Xian's astral nova was released. Her avatar appeared, causing this entire space to transform into an illusory realm. She lightly stroked the zither as her fingers plucked the strings. The dancing musical notes directly blasted into the bodies of Poison Scorpion and the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect, causing them to involuntarily retreat as their countenances turned extremely heavy. That's right. Fairy, you're angry. The Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect coldly spoke. The fluctuations of Lin Xian's melody seemed to be able to strike right into his soul, causing him to feel extremely uncomfortable. Lin Xian didn't say anything, but at this moment, Qin Wentian could clearly see her eyes turning in his direction. Although she didn't say anything, those soul-stirring eyes of hers were already filled with words. Just a single glance from her caused Qin Wentian to feel an urge to rush out and fight. However, Qin Wentian didn't. Poison Scorpion was very strong. Although his attacks were not very overbearing, they were strange and difficult to deal with. They were more dangerous than some overbearing and sharp attacks. A single drop of his blood could take someone's life. The attacks of the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect were tyrannical and tyrannical. Demonic chi towered up into the sky, and each of his strikes could shake the heavens and earth, displaying his overwhelming strength. They were strong, but so was Lin Xian. Her silhouette seemed to have turned blurry. The power of the illusory realm made it so that people couldn't tell where her true body was. Each of her attacks weren't as powerful as the ones in the illusory realm. But when the dancing notes slammed into the bodies of Poison Scorpion and the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect, it caused them to feel extremely uncomfortable. Even their combat prowess was greatly affected. Her melody contains a soul attack. Qin Wentian silently mused in his heart. This lofty maiden, when she was truly enraged, even outstanding characters like Poison Scorpion and the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect had no way to subdue her within a short period of time. On the contrary, they were forced into such a sorry state by her. When your master implanted the treasures of others into your body, didn't you feel that the treasures were stained with the blood of others? Qin Wentian slowly spoke. Lu Bingyu, who was beside him, was as lofty and cold as ever. When she heard Qin Wentian's words, her palms only trembled slightly, after which she icily replied, "How much blood has your hands been stained by now? Earlier when the two of them were insulting you, your eyes clearly flashed with killing intent. Maybe you are not as cold as you appear to be." Qin Wentian instantly jumped to another topic, causing Lu Bingyu to furrow her brows. Originally, there was no need for her to care about Qin Wentian's words. Given her personality, she had already promised her master that her performance in the immortal martial realm this time around would be even more dazzling compared to Sword Sovereign Ling Tian's senior apprentice brother. If that was the case, her master would have more face in front of her senior apprentice brother, Sword Sovereign Ling Tian. Thinking of the lonely back view of her master, Lu Bingyu clenched her fists tightly, thinking that she mustn't let her master down. At the very least, she mustn't let her master lose face in front of that man, even if that man was the sect leader of the Battle Sword sect. However, this young man who had comprehended 14 sword strikes the first time he stepped into the Battle Sword sect, had a powerful might hidden within his calm voice, causing Lu Bingyu to be unable to ignore his existence. This young man should be calling her senior apprentice sister. Although he was just standing there quietly like her, one could faintly sense the ambition and self-confidence of someone who would seek swordsmanship under the heavens. "What about you? You should already be acquainted with her. She addressed you as Sir Qin while you directly called her Xian. Yet now you are speaking to me with a heart of stone. Can I say that you are not as passionate as you appear to be? In truth, you are also a cold-blooded man." When Lu Bingyu spoke, it was as though there was a frosty intent gushing out, wanting to freeze people. A strange feeling appeared in Qin Wentian's heart when he heard her words. It was as though there wasn't only enmity towards him in those cold words. Even the word man contained a trace of enmity. He couldn't help but feel strange in his heart. Could it be that this Lu Bingyu had been dumped by a man before? Lu Bingyu's countenance was incomparably cold, akin to ice and snow. But if one carefully observed her countenance, other than her beauty, Qin Wentian could tell that she should be very young. Given her age and her strength at the very least, she wouldn't be bullied by men, right? Qin Wentian involuntarily thought of Lu Bingyu's master, the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. Or could it be that she was led astray by that old witch? The Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness has been bullied by men before? Qin Wentian casually spoke, his words causing Lu Bingyu to instantly radiate a bone-chilling coldness. She icily replied, "You dare to insult my master? That old witch wanted my foster father to dig out his bones to retrieve the treasure. Just a single sentence from her can be considered an insult. Now that the treasure is in your possession, have you ever thought about what would happen to you if I were to defeat you?" Qin Wentian icily replied. The two of them seemed to be equally arrogant. Lu Bingyu turned her head and stared at Qin Wentian. Her clear eyes were filled with coldness and arrogance, as well as an intense self-confidence. "I've never thought about it. Because the final victor will definitely be me." Qin Wentian stared at Lu Bingyu as their gazes collided. Lu Bingyu only saw a frivolous smile appearing on Qin Wentian's face. "Let's wait and see." As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Wentian stepped out, rushing into the battlefield. At this moment, Lin Xian was already being suppressed by Poison Scorpion and the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect. When Poison Scorpion and the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect continued to suppress Lin Xian, victory was already in sight. All of a sudden, an intense sense of danger gushed forth. Poison Scorpion and the Saint Child were already fighting with all their might. Lin Xian's strength far exceeded their expectations, causing their souls to be injured. Hence, they only wanted to cripple Lin Xian's cultivation base before teaching her a lesson and humiliating her in the future. At this moment, that sense of danger descended. Poison Scorpion and the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect turned at the same time. After which, they saw Qin Wentian's silhouette flickering like a shadow. His arms blasted out, yet it was as though there were no weapons in his arms. Poison Scorpion laughed malevolently. His palms shone with a blood-colored light as he grabbed towards Qin Wentian. As long as he managed to tear through Qin Wentian's body, Qin Wentian would undoubtedly die. What's going on? At this moment, Poison Scorpion's heart shuddered violently. He could feel an intense sense of danger looming over him. After which, a blood-colored light appeared at his throat as his mind was occupied by a blood-colored illusion. After which, he felt a sharp pain in his throat, as though a sharp object had pierced through it. That was an ancient halberd that seemed to originate from the void. At the same time, Qin Wentian's left hand wasn't idle either. A terrifying palm imprint blasted out, directly colliding with the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect. Although the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect was strong, under this attack, his blood and chi still churned wildly as he was forced back. Numerous zither notes transformed into indomitable killing weapons that directly pierced through the head of the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect. Fresh blood splattered out. But the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect still didn't believe that he would die. His eyes stared fixedly at Qin Wentian. That young man whose eyes gleamed with a demonic light was staring at him as a smile appeared on his face, as though he was mocking his arrogance back then. Lu Bingyu's frozen heart involuntarily trembled when she saw this scene. A dazzling light flickered in her clear eyes. Qin Wentian had killed two powerful heaven chosen the moment he acted. She could naturally tell how precise Qin Wentian's grasp of timing was. This was why he was able to create such a sure kill attack, causing the two of them to lose the chance to flee. So it turned out that it wasn't that he didn't want to act, but rather, he was waiting for an opportunity to deal a fatal blow, directly eliminating two powerful opponents. However, very swiftly, Lu Bingyu's countenance returned to normal, as cold as snow. But even so, he still couldn't obstruct her path. In this place, there was no one who could obstruct her. She had to surpass the most dazzling character in the Heavenly Dipper realm of the Battle Sword Sect, Ji Feishue. Lin Xian stared at Qin Wentian. She lowered her head before raising it again. Those beautiful eyes of hers that could mesmerize the masses flickered with a bright light. This demon-like young man in front of her was extremely ordinary and quiet. But what sort of pride and ambitions did he have in his heart? Seeing that you didn't act, Xian truly felt a little disappointed. Lin Xian gently smiled. Before this, Qin Wentian was merely spectating from the sidelines. Although Lin Xian didn't say anything, she understood their respective standpoints. If she failed, to Qin Wentian, wasn't it a good thing? He would have one less powerful opponent. But even so, she couldn't help but feel a tinge of disappointment in her heart. Saving the damsel in distress at the most crucial moment would move people's hearts. This is especially so for a beauty like Xian. Qin Wentian shrugged as he jokingly spoke. Such a response from Qin Wentian caused Lin Xian to be stunned. She stared at the young man with the radiant smile on his face, and finally, she couldn't help but to giggle. She was actually being teased by a man. But at this moment, a thought appeared in her mind. She wanted to know what Qin Wentian was thinking in his heart. Lin Xian's smile caused even Qin Wentian, who was joking, to fall into a daze. The two of them didn't seem to be enemies at all, causing Qin Wentian to be unable to bear to continue fighting. "I withdraw." A melodious voice rang out. Staring at the beautiful woman before him who had a bashful smile on her face as she turned and left, Qin Wentian was completely stunned. "I take back my previous words. How can someone like Sir Qin be beneath the 8 era-suppressing geniuses?" Lin Xian's melodious voice rang out elegantly, after which she really left the pagoda. Chapter 580. Lin Xian's withdrawal caused Qin Wentian to feel a trace of surprise. After all, he had personally witnessed Lin Xian's strength. She was able to withstand the combined attacks of Poison Scorpion and the Saint Child of the Supreme Demon Sect, even injuring them. Such tyrannical strength wasn't as weak as she appeared on the surface. Not only that, Qin Wentian had a slight understanding of Lin Xian. Her heart was higher than the heavens, and she was extremely arrogant. But right now, she actually chose to give up with a smile on her face. In this journey to the immortal martial realm, which Heaven Chosen didn't have wild ambitions. Although it seemed like they were only competing against heavenly dipper sovereigns in the immortal martial realm, those who entered the immortal martial realm represented an entire era. They were the future of the royal sacred region, and since they could become the most dazzling existences in the immortal martial realm, their future would definitely not be ordinary. Hence, no one was willing to give up, even if it was a single defeat. They didn't know what impact a single defeat would have on them in the future, but everyone was very clear that if they wanted to become the most dazzling existence, they couldn't afford to lose even a single time. Qin Wentian stared at that soul-stirring smile as he recalled that night when Lin Xian told him about the 8 era-suppressing geniuses. She said that those 8 were even more outstanding existences compared to him, Qin Wentian. But now she had changed her words. Most probably, in Lin Xian's heart, she already viewed Qin Wentian as an existence as dazzling as those 8, even if his current combat prowess was still lacking. Nodding his head to Lin Xian, Qin Wentian's eyes turned to the last remaining silhouette, Lu Bingyu. Lu Bingyu was also looking at him. An incomparably resolute conviction could be seen in her eyes. That was the determination to win. Her lips parted as she emotionlessly stated, "You won't be able to defeat me. Since we are both from the same sect, I don't wish to injure you. You can leave." Staring at Lu Bingyu's countenance, her long eyelashes added a few hints of beauty to her emotionless eyes. Qin Wentian mused that if Lu Bingyu wasn't so cold, she would definitely be an existence capable of bringing calamity to empires. The coldness she exuded seemed to be ingrained in her bones, causing others to be unable to get close to her. Even if one stood before her, they would feel that they were very far away. Lu Bingyu's words caused Qin Wentian to feel a little taken aback. Seems like what he said was true. Although she looked so cold, her heart wasn't as cold as her appearance. In the immortal martial realm, the moment one stood on the opposite side, the friendship of being from the same sect was insignificant. Both of them were equally proud geniuses. Could it be that the other party would give up just because they were from the same sect and give the glory to the other party? This was also the reason why he didn't feel surprised when that expert from the Battle Sword sect sneak attacked Qin Wentian. Maybe when facing external enemies, the friendship of being from the same sect could become a rope that bound them together, allowing them to fight shoulder to shoulder for the glory of their sect. But in this realm, the opponent was an enemy. Lu Bingyu wouldn't give up. Qin Wentian naturally wouldn't give up as well. However, wasn't this woman as cold as ice, a little too confident in herself? "Let's fight." Qin Wentian wielded the ancient halberd in his hands as he spoke. The instant the sound of his voice faded, Frost danced in the air as this entire space abruptly turned exceptionally cold. Lu Bingyu quietly stood there, as though she was standing in a snowfield. The fluttering snowflakes contained a biting cold intent, as well as a bone-piercing sharpness. When they landed on Qin Wentian, they felt as though they were as sharp as swords, wanting to lacerate Qin Wentian's skin. Ji Feishua's drifting snow sky swordplay. I'm not any weaker than him. Lu Bingyu suddenly spoke. Her tone was as cold as ever, but from her words, Qin Wentian could sense that she wanted to contend against Ji Feishua. As one of the era-suppressing geniuses, there was no need to doubt Ji Feishua's status in the battle sword sect. He was the most dazzling existence in the Heavenly Dipper realm. No matter how outstanding the others were, they were all suppressed by Ji Feishua. Most probably Lu Bingyu, the personal disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness, was the same. The snowflakes grew sharper and sharper, as though they could really lacerate a human's body. Qin Wentian's blood surged. His entire person exuded an incomparably demonic aura. His gaze was filled with loftiness as he stared at Lu Bingyu. The ancient halberd in his hands shone with a terrifying astral light, as well as a hint of blood red. At this moment, Qin Wentian felt extremely cold. When the will of a mandate at the perfection boundary landed on him, even though Qin Wentian's bloodline was extremely powerful and his demonic qi enveloped him, he still couldn't help but feel a bone-chilling coldness. Not only that, there was also a sharpness to this coldness. Busy. A surge of sword might gushed forth, hidden within the snowflakes that filled the skies, shooting towards Qin Wentian. Lu Bingyu's hands were already on the hilt of her sword, as though she was about to draw it out. The might of this attack grew stronger and stronger. Boom. Qin Wentian stepped out, releasing his sword-type Astral Nova. In an instant, a surge of sword might enveloped the area, wanting to break apart Lu Bingyu's attack. With a single step, he transformed into a series of afterimages as the ancient halberd stabbed out explosively, aiming for Lu Bingyu's head. The humming of a sword could be heard as Lu Bingyu drew her sword. The cold light from her sword shone upon Qin Wentian's countenance, causing his ancient halberd to be blocked. The overwhelming might of the halberd directly shattered the sword. After all, this halberd of Qin Wentian's was an attack infused with the will of his mandate. The might of this attack was extremely tyrannical. However, the shattered sword transformed into beams of terrifying cold light, explosively blasting towards Qin Wentian. A raging wind gusted by. Qin Wentian dodged to the side, only to see the snowflakes engulfing his body. The sword qi before Lu Bingyu instantly condensed into a sword as she slashed out towards Qin Wentian. The snowflakes filled the skies, transforming into a sword of cold light that could sweep away everything, wanting to sever this entire space apart. Lin Xian'er, who was below, paid close attention to this attack. When she saw how exquisite Lu Bingyu's sword technique was, her heart involuntarily trembled. The cold light from that sword left behind a trail of white light in the air. How powerful was that? Astral energy gushed forth from Qin Wentian's body. With a lift of his hand, he slashed out with his halberd. His movements were so natural and casual, as though it was as simple as waving his hands. Qin Wentian had trained his halberd hundreds and thousands of times. His halberd was no different from his hands, and the speed of his attack was extremely fast. Bang! A surge of destructive energy erupted forth. That white light collided with the halberd, transforming into a destructive shockwave. White light continued to whiz past Qin Wentian from both sides, lacerating his robes as he felt a chill run down his spine. However, this was only the beginning of Lu Bingyu's attack. Just as Qin Wentian blocked the attack, he saw Lu Bingyu's silhouette slowly walking over. She stabbed out with her sword, and her sword technique was as cold as ever. It was as though the instant her sword stabbed out, one could feel the coldness in their body, as though they were about to die under her sword. The frost in the air transformed into a gigantic winter plum blossom. This winter plum blossom bloomed from the center of the sword, aiming to devour Qin Wentian. It was beautiful and demonic. Qin Wentian's left hand had long been preparing a tyrannical attack. With a single palm strike, the force of a raging tempest gushed forth, stacking together with millions of palm imprints, causing a thunderous boom to echo out. When the palm strike landed in the center of the winter plum blossom, it was instantly annihilated. Although the winter plum blossom had withered, its petals were still fluttering in the air, as cold and sharp as ever. Amidst the snowy petals, a speck of cold light appeared, aiming for Qin Wentian's throat. It was so fast that Qin Wentian felt as though the blood flowing in his throat had frozen. It was as though Qin Wentian had already predicted that his opponent's sword would arrive. His ancient halberd once again collided with Lu Bingyu, and both of them were forced backwards from the impact. Lu Bingyu stood there, the coldness radiating from her body extended outwards. Instantly, this entire space seemed to have transformed into a world of ice and snow, growing colder and colder. Are you really not willing to give up? Lu Bingyu stared at Qin Wentian as she coldly spoke. My next attack might really kill you. If you can kill me, I won't have any resentment. Qin Wentian was as calm as ever. Lu Bingyu lightly nodded her head, and after that, her sword slashed downwards. A casual sword strike of hers was akin to a beam of cold light, containing the speed of the wind and the power of lacerations. Qin Wentian's ancient halberd vanished. Both of his palms contained a fearsome might as he blasted out a palm strike, shattering Lu Bingyu's sword technique. After that, Lu Bingyu's sword technique was completely unleashed. Lin Xian quietly watched on from below. Lu Bingyu's sword slashed out again and again. Her sword was cold yet elegant, and she was so calm. Her sword danced together with the frost in the air, unstoppable. There was no place her sword couldn't reach. Staring at her sword technique, a hint of admiration flashed in Lin Xian's eyes. Such a beautiful and elegant woman. She should be even more dazzling. It was just that under the guidance of that stubborn old woman, the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness, would Lu Bingyu's personality also become more extreme? Qin Wentian also completely erupted. His bloodline surged as demonic qi towered up into the sky. Both of his palms blasted out in a frenzy, causing the entire space to be filled with countless palm imprints, leaving behind numerous imprints in the air. Boundless violent sword qi clashed against the palm imprints in the air. Lu Bingyu was dancing amidst the snowflakes and sword light. However, at this moment, a thunderous boom rang out, originating from the void. Her countenance abruptly changed as she retreated, after which, an indomitable aura gushed forth from her. A crashing sound spread out, and a faint axe light erupted from her body. Along with the sword qi on her body, the axe light cleaved down and split apart the palm print that came from the void. However, this also made her heart tremble. This kind of void palm print was too powerful. Not only was it powerful in terms of attack power, but it was also very stealthy. Once it appeared, this terrifying palm print would directly fall on your head. How terrifying was that? How terrifying was that? Busy. Bathing in the axe light, Lu Bingyu brandished her sword once again. The might of her sword art grew even more terrifying as her attack power increased explosively. This caused Lin Xian's beautiful eyes to go into a daze. Was this a treasure that originally belonged to the human emperor? The two of them were evenly matched, yet Lu Bingyu suddenly had such an unexpected change. To Qin Wentian, this was definitely a fatal blow. And as expected, Lu Bingyu's sword slashed apart the palm imprint in front of her as it slashed towards Qin Wentian. Boom! A terrifying drum sound thundered out, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Qin Wentian's entire body was surrounded by battle drums. His eyes were filled with disdain as he stared at Lu Bingyu. His body floated in the air as an air of arrogance flickered in his eyes. It was as though he was the only one in the world. Boom boom. Two consecutive sounds reverberated through the heavens and earth. After which, Lu Bingyu felt a surge of destructive might gushing over. The frost and snow in the air danced as she slashed out with her sword. However, at the instant her sword light slashed out, a palm imprint capable of destroying the heavens and earth materialized, pressing down on Lu Bingyu. Lu Bingyu's body retreated as the booming sounds continued unceasingly. One after another, the palm imprint seemed as though it wanted to crush the heavens. Fresh blood dyed the frost, and snow in the air a shade of red. The eyes of that breathtaking maiden were as cold and proud as ever. She was like a winter plum blossom in the snow, standing tall in the wind and rain. Only death could cause her to wither away. The fresh blood in the snow added a sense of tragedy to this unyielding winter plum blossom. Chapter 581. Lin Xian's beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at the battle within the pagoda. Even with her state of heart, she couldn't help but feel shocked. Although Qin Wentian had already gained some fame after killing Yi Kongfan, he was still considered a rising star in the eyes of many heaven-chosen of the royal sacred region. Lin Xian acknowledged Qin Wentian's talent and potential, but she still couldn't compare him to those true heaven-chosen. That was until he killed Poison Scorpion and the saint child of the Supreme Demon sect with a single strike. Right now, as she stared at the battle drums on his body, Lin Xian couldn't help but sigh in her heart. This immortal martial realm was known as the Graveyard of Geniuses, but wasn't it also a place where geniuses awakened as well? Truly outstanding characters wouldn't be buried. This handsome young man seemed to have already undergone a transformation in the immortal martial realm. He was already strong enough to suppress all the geniuses here. Not only that, he even obtained a divine weapon from the immortal martial realm. She naturally knew that divine weapons brought from outside the immortal martial realm couldn't be used. Only divine weapons from the immortal martial realm would be able to do so. Maybe divine weapons from the immortal martial realm weren't as powerful as the supreme divine weapons bestowed to them by their elders, but the effects of divine weapons from the immortal martial realm could be amplified to the extreme. For example, if she fought against Lu Bingyu, under the situation where both of their strengths were roughly the same, Lu Bingyu would be able to suppress her with absolute dominance if she took out a divine weapon from the immortal martial realm. Not only that, if Lu Bingyu was already strong enough, she would be able to sweep across all heaven chosen with the help of a divine weapon from the immortal martial realm. She might even be able to reach the height of those 8 in the immortal martial realm. In addition, Lin Xian was also very clear that the number of people who could obtain a divine weapon in the immortal martial realm was exceedingly few. Hence, many people in the outside world speculated that the divine weapon in the immortal martial realm would be able to accompany a stellar martial cultivator as they grew stronger, even changing their aptitude, causing them to undergo a qualitative transformation. Back then, the human emperor of Yi was a very good example. Before this, didn't Yi Qingyan reveal his true brilliance only after the immortal martial realm ended? This was also the most obvious example that outsiders could find. But as for what the truth was, only Yi Qingyan himself would know. Qin Wentian could personally hear the human emperor saying that his rise wasn't something that could be summed up by a mere divine weapon. He was mocking those who went to snatch the divine weapon. But no matter what, Qin Wentian had already obtained a divine weapon from the immortal martial realm. This was sufficient to cause Lin Xian to sigh in admiration. Naturally, what caused Lin Xian to be taken aback was that cold silhouette. That proud and aloof silhouette that was forced to retreat, coughing out blood unceasingly, exuding an aura that would rather break than bend. When placed on a female, wouldn't that be a different kind of strength of character? When Lin Xian saw Lu Bingyu coughing out blood under Qin Wentian's relentless attacks, she couldn't help but feel pity for Lu Bingyu. This was because she started to admire that proud and aloof young beauty. The favorite disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness was truly extraordinary. Lin Xian only hoped that this lass wouldn't be led astray by that old witch. But of course, the prerequisite was that Qin Wentian wouldn't destroy this tenacious snow plum blossom here. A gentle smile appeared in Lin Xian's eyes. She didn't know why, but she believed that Qin Wentian wouldn't be so heartless. After all, Lu Bingyu was a different kind of beauty. Although her demeanor was a little cold, it was unable to mask her transcendent demeanor, a demeanor that was different from those who used makeup. When Lin Xian saw the ancient halberd in Qin Wentian's hands pointing at Lu Bingyu's throat, her heart involuntarily skipped a beat. Her eyes shone brightly as she stared at the tip of the ancient halberd. On the top of the pagoda, Qin Wentian stared at Lu Bingyu, feeling somewhat moved in his heart. This was a woman who would rather break than bend. His first impression of Lu Bingyu wasn't that good. And the reason was naturally because of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. But as they exchanged blows, he saw more things. This woman in front of him was even more outstanding and tenacious compared to many other young geniuses. Why must you do this? You definitely have the chance to break free from the battle. Qin Wentian stared at the cold countenance in front of him, feeling a little fearful in his heart. Lu Bingyu acted as though she didn't hear his words. She felt a stabbing pain in her heart, feeling extremely unbearable. She was an orphan, and since she was very young, she had been following her master, the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. The Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness wasn't only her master, she also played the role of a parent. Although she was extremely strict with her, she knew that the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness wanted nothing more than to surpass that man. If she couldn't surpass him herself, at the very least, she had to let her disciple do so. Hence, the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness placed all her hopes on her. Lu Bingyu was very outstanding. The Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness had once said that among the young geniuses in the Battle Sword sect, other than Ji Feishue, there was no one who could be compared to her disciple, Lu Bingyu. Although many people weren't convinced, Lu Bingyu's outstanding performance in the Battle Sword sect soon caused others to acknowledge the words of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. At such a young age, she was already as dazzling as a constellation, chasing after Ji Feishue's footsteps. But today, before she could even stand in front of Ji Feishue and fight against the 8 era-suppressing geniuses, she was already defeated by this young man in front of her. Not only that, this young man was the same as her, a disciple of the Battle Sword sect. What's even more ironic was that her master had once snatched away the treasure of this young man's foster father for her. Yet she was still defeated by him. Lu Bingyu felt that she had no way to face her master. When she walked out of the immortal martial realm, how disappointed would the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness be? Qin Wentian frowned when he saw the despair and struggle in Lu Bingyu's eyes. Since this young woman in front of him didn't fear death, what was it that caused her to be in such despair? There was only one possibility. The Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness had expectations and hope for her. For the sake of your master? Qin Wentian asked in a low voice. Is it worth it? Kill me, dig out the treasure axe from my body and return it to your foster father. My master did it for me, and you did it for your foster father. Even if I die in your hands, I have no regrets. Lu Bingyu's expression was as cold as ever. She closed her eyes, but such a resolution caused Qin Wentian to be stunned. Staring at that pale countenance, the ancient halberd in his hands actually had no way to pierce forward. Glancing at Lu Bingyu's body, did he really have to break open her skin and take out the treasure? When your master took away my foster father's treasure, my foster father once said, "This is just a mere treasure, could it be that my rise really depended on it?" How laughable. And after your master obtained the treasure, he also told me that the disciples he taught would naturally teach me a lesson in the immortal martial realm. Given my foster father's magnificence, how could he care about a mere divine weapon? Maybe, what he truly couldn't accept was the humiliation he felt when so many experts came knocking on his door. Qin Wentian slowly continued. After defeating you today, I really want to see if the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness still remembers the words she said in the past. As for this debt, I don't think it should be placed on you, but on the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness instead. Although the Battle Sword sect has the least number of disciples in the 9 great sects, they still cause people to feel trepidation because of how outstanding their disciples are. I believe that a girl like you should have an even more dazzling future. I hope you can remember that you are a disciple of the Battle Sword sect, and not merely the disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. I won't kill you, nor will I take away your treasure. The reason why I can see from you the strength of the Battle Sword sect's disciples is that of the Battle Sword sect. After speaking, the ancient halberd in Qin Wentian's hand lashed out. The powerful force of the impact directly blasted Lu Bingyu off the pagoda. Qin Wentian stared at Lu Bingyu below, his countenance as calm as still water. He had his own principles. The human emperor had his own pride and strength of character. He believed that his foster father would be able to understand what he said and did. Being limited to a mere treasure, that was the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness and not the human emperor. What Qin Wentian wanted to do was to make the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness lower her head and admit her mistakes one day. He didn't want to destroy such an outstanding disciple like Lu Bingyu. Only then would that be the pride that belonged to him, Qin Wentian. Naturally, There were two other reasons why Qin Wentian spared Lu Bingyu. Firstly, it was because Lu Bingyu said that since we are both from the same sect, I don't want to hurt you. Secondly, it was because Lu Bingyu was a woman, and an extremely beautiful one at that. Maybe Qin Wentian didn't care about this reason, but it was undeniable that this was one of the reasons. After all, Qin Wentian was a man. Lu Bingyu was knocked down from the pagoda. A look of astonishment flashed in her clear eyes as she inclined her head and stared at the young man on top of the pagoda. At this moment, Qin Wentian was also looking at her. She could see the resolution and determination in his eyes, as well as a sense of lofty conviction. Qin Wentian stepped towards the top of the pagoda. All his competitors had been knocked down. There was no longer anyone who could obstruct him from ascending to the peak. The white light grew stronger and stronger, causing a piercing pain in Qin Wentian's eyes. Qin Wentian's eyes narrowed into slits as he lifted his hands and grabbed towards the white light. However, he wasn't able to grab hold of anything. The intense white light suddenly grew even more dazzling, and at the same time, a beam of light shot into the center of Qin Wentian's brows. His mind felt a piercing pain, as though something had drilled into his mind. The beam of light that drilled into Qin Wentian's mind was actually a mnemonic chant. The light shone brightly, shaking Qin Wentian's mind. That mnemonic chant was being chanted directly in his mind, so loud that even the deaf could hear it. Qin Wentian's body abruptly trembled. That mnemonic chant was extremely difficult to understand, yet it contained an incomparably marvelous energy that permeated every part of his body. As the mnemonic chant was being chanted, the intense astral energy in Qin Wentian's body frenziedly erupted forth, wanting to break through the limits of his body. His Yuanfu and astral novas were also trembling violently, howling and roaring. The meridians in his body were all trembling, and his blood was like a raging ocean. This sudden change caused Qin Wentian to feel a sense of unbearable agony. With a wah sound, he involuntarily coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood. The mnemonic chant grew more and more chaotic, with no rhyme or reason to it. It was like a surge of energy that didn't belong to him, forcefully rushing into his mind. Stop. Qin Wentian's heart trembled violently. Relying on his powerful will, he forcibly stopped the chanting of the mnemonic chant. He was worried that if the mnemonic chant continued to reverberate in his mind, it would cause his body to explode. Chapter 582. Within the immortal martial realm, there was a vast land that exuded an ancient aura. This land was extremely vast and there were many silhouettes here. Any one of them was an extremely famous heavenly dipper heaven chosen of the royal sacred region. Even the 8 era-suppressing geniuses were included. At the back of this vast region, numerous floating bridges could be seen intersecting with each other, exuding a majestic aura. Over there was the point where the 81 floating bridges intersected. Many silhouettes appeared on the bridges, staring at the vast region ahead, staring at those dazzling silhouettes. In truth, the silhouettes on the intersecting floating bridges were all extremely outstanding heavens chosen. There were people from the 9 great sects, princes from ancient countries, saint children and holy maidens from the great sects, but right now, they actually didn't have the guts to step down from the floating bridges. This was because they could clearly feel the auras of the other heavens chosen below. They were so powerful that they couldn't contend against them. Not only that, these people's cultivation bases were still suppressed. If they were to step down from the floating bridges, any one of the heavens chosen below would be able to kill them with a single slap. Even though these geniuses did not want to admit defeat and had a resolute will, the gap between them was right in front of them. They had no choice but to accept the fact that they had been eliminated. Gu Lufeng is still as outstanding as ever. No matter where he is, he would always be the focal point when he's clad in white. On the floating bridge, a heavens chosen from an ancient sect stared at Gu Liufeng's silhouette as a look of admiration flashed in her eyes. Although the royal sacred region was boundlessly vast, given their background and talent, there weren't many in the same generation that could attract their attention. Hence, those who could truly attract their attention were undoubtedly the most outstanding characters in the royal sacred region. Gu Lufeng was precisely one of the most outstanding among them. That calm lake severing the moon, shooting through the 9 heavens, had long since become the symbol of the younger generation. No matter who it was, they would inevitably be compared to him. And in the end, they would discover that there was no one who could be compared to such a character. This was especially so for Gu Lufeng, who had no background in the royal sacred region. This made him even more valuable. Are you moved? Next to him was a woman wearing a pink dress. She looked a bit delicate, but those who knew her knew that this beautiful woman was definitely not someone to be trifled with. There are very few people who wouldn't be moved when facing the 8 era-suppressing geniuses. In addition, Gu Lufeng can be considered the most outstanding among the 8. The woman from earlier smiled faintly. Moreover, it seems like he was the first one to walk down. The others only arrived after him. I didn't expect that we wouldn't even be able to get a ticket to this competition. The previous tests were really too difficult. My last test was against a demonic tree. Only 3 people passed the test, and were thrown away by the demonic tree. We didn't know where they were sent to, so we were trapped in the same place. After a period of time, the demonic tree suddenly disappeared. Only then were we able to continue forward and finally arrived here. A faint smile appeared on the woman's face. However, there was a hint of bitterness in her smile. However, my cultivation base has always been suppressed. I no longer have the qualifications to contend against those people. There's still a chance. There are some secret realms on our floating bridge. As long as you pass the test, you will be able to head to a place named Immortal Guides the Way. It's just that I failed. The woman at the side bitterly smiled as she shook her head. She herself was an extremely arrogant person, yet she had failed that extremely difficult test. When she thought of that demonic monkey who claimed to be the guardian of the test, she couldn't help but feel depressed. That's right, there are many secret realms on the floating bridge, as well as many tests. There are some people who can advance courageously, but there are also some who have to take a detour. Look over there, Princess Jiaoyang of the Great Zhou Empire. She's extremely powerful, passing through numerous extremely difficult tests and obtaining a fiery steed. The other woman turned her gaze over when she heard this. Indeed, she saw Princess Jiaoyang galloping atop a fiery steed, exuding an unexcelled aura. The fiery steed floated in the air, its body glowed with a fiery light, causing Princess Jiaoyang to be enveloped in a halo of light. At this moment, a figure appeared beside them. This person was clad in the long robes of royalty, incomparably luxurious. His eyes gleamed with a golden light, causing people to feel a sense of fear. The aura of this person was at the 7th level of Heavenly Dipper, and it was evident that he had broken free from the suppression of his cultivation base. It's Shang Tong, the Prince of Grand Shang Empire, Shang Tong. His cultivation base has already broken through to the 7th level of Heavenly Dipper, and his cultivation base is extremely stable. He's much stronger compared to when he first entered the immortal martial realm. Someone recognized this person as they exclaimed in shock. The Grand Shang Empire and Grand Xia Empire are both extremely powerful. Other than Princess Jiaoyang, there's another prince from the Great Zhou Empire who stepped forward as well. After Shang Tong stepped out, a few others appeared behind him, all of them exuding a powerful aura as their eyes gleamed with sharpness. Such a situation didn't cause anyone to be surprised. In truth, every time someone stepped forward, it wouldn't just be a single person. Occasionally, there would be several people appearing at the same time, and all of them were heaven-chosen who possessed the immortal martial medallion. Lin Xian is here. At this moment, a series of exclamations rang out. Many turned their heads only to see the silhouette of Lin Xian appearing in a certain direction. She was still as soul-stirring as ever, her graceful steps like that of a lotus, causing the hearts of others to tremble. Lin Xian is truly powerful, her cultivation base isn't suppressed at all. The crowd sighed in admiration, as expected of a fairy maiden from the celestial maiden sect. Not only was she beautiful, her talent in the martial path was also extremely outstanding. However, the only thing that made the crowd feel uncomfortable was the young man beside Lin Xian. This young man's gaze seemed calm, yet it gave off a sense of sharpness. His eyes calmly stared ahead as he slowly walked forward. Beside this young man, Not only was there a beauty like Lin Xian behind him, there was also an ice-cold beauty. This caused the crowd to involuntarily guess the identity of this young man. Senior Sister Lu. Someone from the Battle Sword sect called out when he saw Lu Bingyu. Lu Bingyu's cold gaze slowly turned over. There was no expression in her eyes. After which, she continued walking forward, her beautiful eyes occasionally glancing at the back of the young man. This young man who came from the same place as her, he should be able to become a dark horse in the immortal martial realm this time around. She is Lu Bingyu, the favorite disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. When the crowd recalled Lu Bingyu's identity, their gazes all froze. Such an outstanding maiden was actually walking behind a young man. Not only that, Lin Xian, the #1 beauty in the immortal martial realm, was also beside her. All of this caused a look of disbelief to appear in the hearts of the crowd. It was rumored that Lu Bingyu was as cold as ice. She had never walked together with any man before. What was going on? Looking at their demeanor, regardless of Lu Bingyu or Lin Xian, both of them seemed to be willing to be the supporting characters. Such a scene undoubtedly caused an intense impact to the hearts of the crowd. The person who called out Lu Bingyu's name earlier was an outstanding female disciple from the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness faction. There were a few other disciples from the Battle Sword sect beside her, and one of them was clad in a robe made of phoenix feathers. She was incomparably beautiful and outstanding, but right now, she was staring at the scene in front of her in astonishment. She simply didn't dare to believe her own eyes. As a personal disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness, Li Hanyo's understanding of Lu Bingyu far surpassed others. She knew that her master had high hopes for Lu Bingyu, and this caused her to feel a faint trace of jealousy in her heart. However, she also knew of Lu Bingyu's talent and strength, as well as her coldness and arrogance. This time around, the reason she came here was to challenge Ji Feishua's position in the Battle Sword sect, to challenge the 8 era-suppressing geniuses. But now Lu Bingyu was walking beside that man, together with Lin Xian. The first time she met Qin Wentian, Li Hanyu was filled with disdain for him. Although he had proven his talent later on, Li Hanyu still wasn't convinced. In the royal palace of Yi, he even dared to threaten her master, the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness. He simply didn't know what was good for him. It was impossible that Lu Bingyu didn't know about what happened in Yi. But now, under the contrast of Lu Bingyu and Lin Xian, this young man who she felt was a little lucky, seemed so extraordinary. Stop right there. For some reason, Li Hanyu called out to Qin Wentian. Her voice wasn't polite at all, and contained traces of coldness, as well as a hint of arrogance. Qin Wentian halted his steps, frowning as he stared at Li Hanyu. In truth, he didn't have much interaction with Li Hanyu, and had only brushed shoulders with her a few times. However, he didn't know why this woman would always stare at him with such unfriendly gazes. She had even appeared in the royal palace of Yi together with the Li clan before. But even so, although Qin Wentian didn't really like the look in her eyes, he didn't hate it either. After all, they weren't familiar at all. At this moment, upon hearing the commanding tone in her voice, Qin Wentian coldly glanced at her. His gaze was like a sharp sword, causing Li Hanyu's heart to tremble violently. This caused her to feel an intense sense of humiliation. A cold killing intent flickered on her beautiful face, and this killing intent caused Qin Wentian's gaze to turn even sharper. Senior sister, back then when Master was in the royal palace of Yi, he said in front of everyone that he wanted you to teach this young man a lesson in the immortal martial realm. Although we are both disciples of the Battle Sword sect, this young man doesn't respect Master at all. Li Hanyu knew that right now, it was impossible for her to be a match for Qin Wentian. However, the look in Qin Wentian's eyes made her feel extremely uncomfortable. Hence, she spoke to Lu Bingyu, hoping that she could borrow Lu Bingyu's strength to deal with Qin Wentian. She didn't want to walk together with him just because they were from the same sect. A cold light flashed in Lu Bingyu's eyes. In truth, although the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness had said this back in Yi, she didn't really instruct her to deal with Qin Wentian. After all, from the perspective of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness, Qin Wentian was merely a junior. There was no need for her to be so serious. Lu Bingyu had her own matters to attend to. Not only that, Li Hanyu still didn't know that Lu Bingyu had already been defeated by Qin Wentian. How could she teach him a lesson? Pack. As the sound of Li Hanyu's voice faded, a crisp sound rang out. Qin Wentian directly slammed out with his palm, sending Li Hanyu flying through the air. When she landed on the ground, she coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood. This slap caused Li Hanyu to be stunned. She climbed up and stared at Qin Wentian in anger, her entire body radiating an intense flame of anger. Qin Wentian's killing intent gushed forth, instantly causing Li Hanyu to feel as though she had fallen into an icy abyss. After which, Qin Wentian turned and continued walking forward, not sparing her a glance. Lu Bingyu also slowly walked forward. Such disregard caused Li Hanyu to feel as though there were countless pairs of eyes staring at her, waiting for her to be humiliated. What an interesting woman. Lin Xian'er laughed lightly, after which, she chased after Qin Wentian. Her melodious voice sounded as though she was mocking Li Hanyu's stupidity, or her overestimation of her own capabilities. Chapter 583. Li Hanyu stared at Qin Wentian, who was ignoring her. She stretched out her hands and touched her cheeks, feeling a burning sensation. At this moment, her eyes were bloodshot, and despite her beauty, she gave off a sense of malevolence. When had she ever suffered such humiliation before? She was the chosen of the Li clan, but today, she was actually slapped ruthlessly in the face. Not only was her body slapped, it was also a slap to her pride. Qin Wentian didn't think too much about it. He continued walking forward, arriving at the boundary of the floating bridges as he stared at the vast space before him. After obtaining the oracular chant, a pathway appeared in the sealed public square. The three of them cultivated there for a few days, allowing themselves to recover to their peak state. After which, they followed the pathway and returned to the floating bridges. However, the bridges started to converge, and so they arrived at this place. Lin Xian'er originally had a good relationship with Qin Wentian, hence she naturally followed him here. She was filled with anticipation. She wanted to see how far this handsome young man whom she had once looked down on could reach. That day, Lu Bingyu was also deeply moved by Qin Wentian's words. Not only did Qin Wentian not kill her, he didn't even take the treasures in her possession because he could see the strength of character that belonged to the battle sword sect from her. After hearing such words, even after Lu Bingyu was smashed down from the pagoda by his halberd, she didn't feel any hatred or resentment towards him. Her heart was unable to calm down even after a long time. She kept thinking about how she should deal with the complicated emotions in her heart. Finally, her heart gave her an answer. She wouldn't hate Qin Wentian, but she would work hard to become more outstanding, stronger, until one day, she regained her pride and defeated Qin Wentian. Although the disciples of the battle sword sect were united, they also encouraged competition and competition. Hence, they would never stop the competition between disciples. The journey to the immortal martial realm hadn't ended yet. She still had a chance. Since Qin Wentian could rise up in the immortal martial realm, why couldn't she undergo a transformation in the immortal martial realm? Qin Wentian and the two others who were the center of attention of the crowd finally stepped out, leaving behind three dazzling silhouettes that impacted the hearts of the spectators. Many years later, when they thought of the legendary characters of the royal sacred region, they would still involuntarily recall this scene today. That handsome young man, in contrast to the number one beauty of the royal sacred region, Lin Xian'er, as well as the ice-cold beauty of the battle sword sect, Lu Bingyu, his silhouette seemed so majestic and imposing, like an insurmountable mountain. Hanyu. Beside Li Hanyu, a disciple who had a good relationship with her wanted to persuade her, only to see that Li Hanyu's bloodshot eyes were filled with killing intent, so cold that it seeped into one's bones. When Li Hantian arrives, I will definitely get Big Brother Hantian to shred him into 1,000 pieces. Li Hanyu didn't know that Li Hantian had already died in the battle against Qin Wentian, Lu Bingyu, and the others. Qin Wentian and the two others landed on the ground, their gazes staring ahead. Over there were numerous gigantic stone monuments that could be called stone ramparts. Each of the stone monuments glowed with an intense light, and each of them seemed to contain an ancient history, bearing witness to the rise of many geniuses. In front of these stone monuments, there was a row of white-robed figures. These people had tranquil expressions on their faces, as though they were people who lived in seclusion. They were the envoys of the immortal martial realm, and were stationed here to guard this place. Other than them, in the vast area in front of the stone monuments, were the most dazzling geniuses of the royal sacred region who had their cultivation bases unrestricted. They all quietly stood there, as though they didn't have the slightest intention of competing against each other. Qin Wentian also saw familiar faces, including the two heaven-chosen from the battle sword sect. One of them was naturally the incomparably dazzling Ji Feishue, and the other was Duan Han. Qin Wentian was extremely happy that Duan Han had also arrived here. As a personal disciple of the Sword Sovereign, Duan Han was usually extremely calm, but when he was brazen, he was a completely different person. No matter where he was placed, Duan Han would definitely be able to radiate a radiance that belonged to him. Other than Duan Han, there was naturally Di Shi who had a grudge against him, as well as the Prince of Gran Shang, Shang Tong. Evidently, when they saw Qin Wentian, their eyes flickered with coldness. This was especially so for Di Shi. The killing intent radiating from him was completely unmasked as it gushed towards Qin Wentian. After all, Qin Wentian had killed his younger brother in front of so many people. He had yet to avenge this debt. However, before Di Shi made a move against Qin Wentian, Ji Feishue and Duan Han had already walked towards Qin Wentian, causing Di Shi to dispel the thought of directly killing Qin Wentian. In the battle sword sect, there were 4 heaven-chosen who managed to reach this step. One of them was an era-suppressing genius, Ji Feishue. If they clashed, the one who would be at a disadvantage would definitely be Di Shi. Junior brother Qin, junior sister Lu. A smile flickered in Ji Feishue's eyes as he felt gratified in his heart. There were 4 people from the battle sword sect who could reach this step. This was something worthy of pride. Duan Han walked behind Ji Feishue, and when he saw Lu Bingyu walking together with Qin Wentian, an expression of interest involuntarily appeared in his eyes. This was especially so when he saw that other than Lu Bingyu, the number 1 beauty of the royal sacred region, Lin Xian was also walking together with Qin Wentian. And when he thought of Mo Qingqing and Qing Duan Han couldn't help but feel jealous of this junior brother of his. Wasn't his luck with women a little too good? Leaving aside Lin Xian he naturally understood what sort of character Lu Bingyu was. She was the favorite disciple of the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness, an iceberg beauty of the battle sword sect. Many people joked that she and Ji Feishue were a match made in heaven. Even their master, Sword Sovereign Ling Tian, had once jokingly said that the two of them were extremely compatible, and even had the intention of matchmaking them. Only the Plum Mountain Sword Sovereigness attitude towards this was extremely cold. She had always hoped that Lu Bingyu would be able to surpass Ji Feishue. But in truth, in the battle sword sect, many people already treated Ji Feishue and Lu Bingyu as a pair. Lu Bingyu, who was behind Qin Wentian, glanced at Ji Feishue. There wasn't much emotion in her cold and beautiful eyes, but after that, she involuntarily glanced at Qin Wentian. For some reason, she couldn't help but compare the two of them in her heart. In the past, her only goal was Ji Feishue. Hence, she paid a lot of attention to Ji Feishue. She had naturally heard of the rumors, and occasionally, strange waves would appear in her heart. Even she herself wasn't clear about her opinion of Ji Feishue. She only knew that he was extremely outstanding, and her goal was to surpass him. Very swiftly, Lu Bingyu retracted her thoughts, silently musing that she was thinking too much. She could see the light in Ji Feishue's eyes growing brighter and brighter. Although Qin Wentian was outstanding enough, there should still be some disparity between him and Ji Feishue. It was just that she didn't know which of the two of them would be able to shoulder the banner of the younger generation of the battle sword sect in the future. Senior brother. Qin Wentian still admired Ji Feishue. He was the pride of the younger generation of the battle sword sect. His smile was sincere, and he didn't have any arrogance in front of the other disciples of the battle sword sect. Back then, he even helped Qin Wentian out of a predicament. Such a character was truly worthy of respect. Junior brother, being able to reach this step is already sufficient to show how outstanding you are. Next, the path of the stone monument will be the true test. Try your best to walk as far as you can. The further you walk, the more benefits you would obtain, and the higher your position on the ranking monument of the immortal martial realm would be. Ji Feishue smiled as he continued. This is the final battle of the immortal martial realm. You must know that when we walk towards the stone monument, our names will appear on the stone monument outside. Very soon, junior brother, your name will be in the limelight of tens of thousands of people, allowing your name to continuously float up. I wonder how many people's hearts would be stirred. Emichung. Qin Wentian nodded his head. His gaze turned to this vast space, staring at the heavens chosen. Those gathered here were the most outstanding heavens chosen who entered the immortal martial realm, including the 8 era-suppressing geniuses. Very soon, they would walk towards the stone monument that recorded the history of the immortal martial realm. The wind gusted by, fluttering the long hair and robes of everyone. Some stood with their eyes closed, while others sat cross-legged. Qin Wentian called out to Ji Feishue before he sat down on the ground and started to meditate. The long robes of the envoys of the immortal martial realm fluttered in the wind. They didn't say anything, indicating that they were still waiting. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. A few more silhouettes arrived. At the intersection point of the floating bridges, Yi Lingshuang and the rest appeared. Fan Luoyang and the rest were there as well. They had barged into many secret realms and passed many tests. Yet they still couldn't lift the restriction on their cultivation bases. Luckily, the gate of the immortal martial realm opened, allowing them to arrive here. From now on, I won't be able to fight shoulder to shoulder with you. Fatty's lips curled up in a smile, as though he was proud of that young man. At this moment, his black eyes didn't have the slightest trace of the wretchedness from before. Instead, they gleamed with sharpness. He would forever remember that day when they met in the royal capital of Chu. They had registered for the academy's examination and entered the dark forest together. At that time, who would have thought that after so many years, that immature young man would have such accomplishments today? This fellow, we want to shorten the distance between us. Yet we only realize that we are getting further and further away. One day, I'm afraid we won't even be able to see his back. Ouyang Guangxing didn't know what to feel in his heart. There was even some jealousy in his heart, but even more than that, he gave his blessings, hoping that Qin Wentian would be able to walk even further on his path. Li Hanyu was still waiting for Li Hantian's arrival. But even when the envoys of the immortal martial realm opened their eyes and stepped aside, Li Hantian still hadn't appeared. This caused Li Hanyu's countenance to turn pale. She knew that Li Hantian would never appear again. At the same time, the crowd also discovered to their shock that the saint child of the supreme demon realm, poison scorpion of the sky poison valley, or the chosen of some ancient country, or some supreme sect, all of them had disappeared, forever remaining in the immortal martial realm, this damnable burial ground of heaven's chosen. So it turns out that he is destined to be a stage for the minority. Someone cursed in a low voice, voicing out the thoughts of many. They initially thought that they would be able to find a place that belonged to them in the immortal martial realm. But in the end, they discovered to their sorrow that they were nothing more than foils. Staring at those silhouettes walking towards the stone monument, the eyes of the crowd all flashed with a trace of desolation. They understood that from today onwards, these people would definitely have a place in the future of the royal sacred region. Outside the immortal martial realm, countless people stared ahead. Up in the skies and down on the ground, in a radius of 100 miles, it was unknown how many people had gathered. They unceasingly squeezed their way forward just to catch a glimpse of the stone monument that was currently radiating a dazzling light. What names would appear on that monument? Gu Lufeng, Ji Feishue, Di Shi, one after another. Names began to float up the monument, gleaming with a resplendent light. These names were extremely familiar to the ears. And as more and more names appeared, the monument grew brighter and brighter. Many experts from the major powers clenched their fists tightly as they stared at the monument ahead. The experts from the Supreme Demon Sect occupied a location as they stared at the monument. When the names no longer appeared, They discovered to their sorrow that the name of the saint child of the supreme demon sect had yet to appear. This caused their hearts to pound as they felt a chill running down their spines. Many people felt the same way. Regardless of the great sects or ancient countries, regardless of the great clans or ancient sects, many powerful characters all felt a chill running down their spines. Naturally, there were also some who had triumphant smiles on their faces. They saw the names of their own sects, especially those from the Battle Sword sect. The 4 names on the monument were simply too dazzling. The fairy maidens from the Medicine Sovereign Valley gathered together. Mo Qingqing stood in the center, staring at the 3 words Qin Wentian, as a soul-stirring smile appeared on her face. Chapter 584. Although Mo Qingqing hadn't stepped into the immortal martial realm yet, ever since Qin Wentian stepped in, her heart had been extremely tense. There was no expression on her face, but one could see a hint of worry in the center of her brows. But now when she saw Qin Wentian's name appearing on the monument, her tightly clenched fists loosened slightly. Sweat could be seen on her palms. The experts from the Medicine Sovereign Valley also saw Qin Wentian's name. Their eyes flashed with a bright light as their evaluation of Qin Wentian rose by several notches. Seems like the man the holy maiden loved was truly not bad, to be able to rank within the top 30 of the ranking monument. However, they didn't know if he would be able to enter the top 30. They glanced at Mo Qingqing, and when they saw the radiant smile on her face, their hearts involuntarily trembled. Such a smile was pure and flawless, so beautiful that it caused the jealousy of many women. They sighed in their hearts. The holy maiden's love for that young man was too deep. They didn't know if this was a good thing or a bad thing. As the holy maiden of the Medicine Sovereign Valley, Mo Qingqing's beauty was so stunning that it was natural for many to pay attention to her. This was especially so for many young males. Their gazes would occasionally sneak glances in her direction, and when they saw the smile on Mo Qingqing's face, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. After which, their gazes turned back to the monument. Holy maiden Mo Qingqing, which name did she see for her to have such a smile on her face? As they thought of this, traces of jealousy could be seen in their hearts. If the holy maiden of the Medicine Sovereign Valley could give them such a smile, even if they had to give up everything, they would have no regrets. The people in the immortal martial realm didn't know what was happening outside. After Qin Wentian and the others inscribed their names on the stone monument, they walked up to it. These stone monuments emitted a marvelous aura. They could choose a stone monument and fuse with the will of the stone monument. Qin Wentian walked towards one of the monuments in the first row. This monument shone with a resplendent golden light, exuding an incomparably domineering aura of wildness and arrogance. This aura attracted him, hence he chose this monument. Instantly, golden light filled the skies as Qin Wentian's will completely fused with the monument. It was as though he had entered another dimension, the dimension of the ancient monument. In this vast space, golden light flashed in the sky. Golden runic lights flashed brilliantly. The golden runic lights converged to form ancient characters that floated in the air, blooming with dazzling splendor. Qin Wentian inclined his head and stared at the golden runes in the air, the resplendent ancient characters. Above these runic lights, a thunderous screech rang out, shaking the heavens and earth. Only to see a gigantic rock clad in golden light that seemed to be forged from pure gold appeared, spitting out beams of resplendent runic light that shot towards Qin Wentian. These runes directly landed on Qin Wentian. In an instant, his entire body turned golden, as though he was also made of pure gold. A shrill screech rang out from his mouth. Qin Wentian's hands trembled as a raging wind howled. He discovered that he actually grew a pair of wings as he transformed into a golden-winged rock. The will of the monument fused into his body. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into the purest form of a golden-winged rock. His hands were sharp as he stared at the ancient characters in the air. These characters seemed to be branded into his mind, transforming into scenes of a golden-winged rock. Qin Wentian also started his cultivation, using the body of a golden-winged rock to cultivate. The golden light radiating from his body grew more and more resplendent as his wings grew longer and sharper. Rumble! A thunderous sound rang out. After which, An azure dragon appeared in Qin Wentian's vision. This azure dragon was extremely terrifying. Its eyes were gigantic as it stared at Qin Wentian. It's the heaven chosen of the divine dragon's stronghold, Heitung. The experts on the floating bridges saw the two stone monuments converging together as two interconnected images appeared in the air. These images were none other than the projections of the two stone monuments. Heitung is the first person to infiltrate the stone monuments of other experts. The first person he found was none other than Qin Wentian, a disciple of the battle sword sect. He was the one who sent Li Hanyu of the Li clan flying with a single slap. Heitung is a heaven chosen of the divine dragon's stronghold. His control over the demonic dragon should be very strong. Qin Wentian's path has reached its end. The crowd mused. The demonic dragon's large eyes stared at the golden-winged rock Qin Wentian transformed into as a cold smile appeared on its face. This was the first time it launched an attack, so it naturally had to find someone who wasn't that dazzling. Hence it chose Qin Wentian, directly launching an attack. The demonic dragon soared through the air, dashing towards the golden-winged rock that Qin Wentian had transformed into. Its thick and powerful claws directly smashed downwards, aiming for the great rock. Qin Wentian's cold eyes stared at his opponent. Golden light flashed as his sharp claws similarly smashed towards the great rock. The azure dragon and the great rock collided. In terms of strength, the azure dragon undoubtedly had the upper hand, directly forcing the great rock to retreat. Qin Wentian's countenance didn't change. His eyes were still fixed on the air, staring at the incantation art as he silently cursed the idiotic azure dragon in his heart. When Heitung saw that Qin Wentian was ignoring him, a malevolent glint flashed in his eyes as he roared. The first battle will be your doomsday. Scram, this place doesn't belong to you. As he spoke, his demonic dragon body once again smashed towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian's wings flashed as he transformed into a beam of golden light and soared into the air. He didn't clash head-on with his opponent. His eyes were still fixed on the air, wanting to comprehend more runic light. The golden light on the great rock's body grew brighter and brighter. Those huge wings were like golden blades, filled with a sharp aura. Roar! The demonic dragon roared. Heitung naturally understood that he couldn't allow Qin Wentian to comprehend in peace. He had to kill Qin Wentian in the shortest amount of time possible and attack as quickly as possible. Only then would he be able to be ahead of the others. Hence, a battle of cat and mouse appeared on the screen of light. The golden-winged rock was injured several times and Qin Wentian, who was standing in front of the stone monument, couldn't help but groan in pain. After another heavy strike, Qin Wentian even spat out a mouthful of blood. However, within the space of the ancient tablet, the rock's eyes grew even more resplendent. The golden light on its body illuminated the heavens, causing a strange light to flash through Heitung's eyes. There seemed to be a hint of anxiety in his eyes, but if he gave up on attacking now and returned to comprehending, he would undoubtedly be weaker than Qin Wentian. He could only continue to attack with his strongest attacks. At this moment, it wasn't only Heitung and Qin Wentian who were fighting. In the air, there were many scenes of the ancient tablets connecting together. This caused the spectators on the floating bridges to understand that this battle was a one-on-one battle. Not many people paid attention to Qin Wentian's battle. The battle scenes of the 8 era-suppressing geniuses attracted the attention of the vast majority. For example, Gu Lufeng chose the ancient tablet that allowed him to be clad in a silvery white armor. A sun-shooting arrow appeared in his hands, exuding a suave and unrestrained aura. Gu Liufeng's opponent was a heaven chosen from one of the 9 great sects of the royal sacred region, the Qinghua Mountains. This battle was naturally chosen by Gu Lufeng. How would his opponent dare to choose him as his opponent? A bright light flashed as Gu Liufeng's bow appeared in his hands. Runic light flashed as the arrow left behind after images. A humming sound rang out as the bowstring vibrated unceasingly. His arrow was like a shooting star. Puchi. A light sound rang out as the center of the brows of the heaven chosen from the Qinghua Mountains was pierced through. The ancient tablet in front of him instantly dimmed. The eyes of the heaven chosen from the Qinghua Mountains opened as he stared in the direction of Gu Lufeng. An expression of desolation could be seen on his face as he coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. After which, he turned and departed the area. Gu Lufeng also opened his eyes. He lifted his feet and continued walking forwards, arriving in front of another set of ancient tablets. After which, his perception gushed out as he chose another one, and began his cultivation. I understand the rules now. On the floating bridge, Fanla spoke in a low voice. Infuse your will into the ancient tablets, cultivating the energy within. In there, you can only cultivate the energy within the tablets and not use your own strength to battle. This way, everyone's starting point will be the same. That's right, only by defeating one opponent can one proceed to the next one. Gu Lufeng should have already comprehended the energy within the first tablet. By defeating one opponent, he can proceed to the second one, and begin comprehending the energy within. This would undoubtedly allow him to gain an advantage. Ouyang Guangxing's eyes gleamed with sharpness. If Gu Lufeng also comprehended the energy within the second tablet, it would be even easier for him to attack those who came after him. The disparity between them would only grow greater and greater. The stronger one is, the further they can walk on their path, until they leave everyone behind them, becoming the sole existence. Yi Lingshuang's beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light as she stared in the direction of Qin Wentian. Heiting was still relentlessly attacking Qin Wentian. But now it was no longer a threat to Qin Wentian. That golden rock was growing stronger and stronger. He's going to retaliate. Qin Zheng spoke. After which, the spectators only saw Qin Wentian in the form of a golden-winged rock arcing through the skies, diving downwards. Golden light illuminated the skies as his golden wings shone with resplendent runic light. His wings sliced through the air like a gust of wind as his silhouette appeared beneath Heitung. After which, Heitung's demonic dragon form was directly cleaved into two. Pooh! Heitung coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood onto the stone monument, causing it to lose its luster. He opened his eyes and stared in the direction of Qin Wentian, his countenance extremely unsightly to behold. Qin Wentian's eyes were still closed. He was still immersed in comprehending the energy within the stone monument. There were many people like him who were extremely cautious, choosing to focus on comprehending instead of fighting. But as time flowed on, more and more victors appeared, moving towards the stone monument in the front. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Initially, there were over 70 people standing before the stone monument, but now there were only 36 remaining. Gu Lufeng has already consecutively defeated 3 people, and is moving towards the 4th row. There's only one person standing before the 4th row now. Everyone had expressions of shock on their faces. This Gu Lufeng was too powerful. Every time he was about to comprehend something, he would choose a person to fight against and blast his opponent away. Also, the spectators discovered that those who walked to the front could choose to attack those weaker than them. For a character like Gu Lufeng, it was impossible for him to stop and wait for others to arrive. All the geniuses walked towards the stone monument at the same time. To them, it was all fair. If they weren't as fast as the others and were defeated, who else could they blame? 3 days later, the spectators discovered a strange phenomenon. Qin Wentian was actually still standing before the first row of stone monuments. This involuntarily caused a strange expression to appear on the faces of many. Right now, Qin Wentian's name was truly known by everyone. Gu Lufeng was the first to leave behind. Qin Wentian was the last to arrive. Chapter 585. Regardless of Gu Lufeng or Di Shi, regardless of Ji Feishue or Qin Wentian, all these geniuses who were walking towards the stone monuments instantly understood what was contained within. Most probably, these stone monuments were the treasures left behind by the master of the immortal martial realm. Each and every one of them contained an extremely powerful innate technique. Not only that, even if they were defeated, they wouldn't die. One could say that to those who entered the immortal martial realm, this was the time for them to truly reap the rewards. How much they could obtain would depend on their own abilities. Hence, they all understood that the further they walked, the more they would be able to see. Gu Lufeng, who was at the front, understood, and Qin Wentian, who was at the back, also understood. However, the two of them chose two completely different paths. Gu Lufeng chose to advance rapidly. Although he had an incomparably resplendent reputation in the royal sacred region, he was also clear that he could be arrogant in his heart, but he couldn't allow this arrogance to affect his determination to advance forward. Compared to others, he needed to advance forward. If not, the moment he fell, it would be fatal. He also understood that each and every one of the stone monuments contained a type of energy. It was impossible for him to completely comprehend them within a short period of time. That would require an extremely long period of time. If he was the only one here, he would definitely stay here and completely comprehend each and every stone monument. But this was the immortal martial realm where geniuses contended against each other. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Hence, he needed a balance between how much he comprehended and how much he could advance. This would allow him to maintain the stance of advancing forward, while also possessing the strength to sweep away others. In truth, Gu Lufeng had also attracted many people to advance together with him. Such a situation caused Gu Lufeng to feel slightly more at ease. Since he could comprehend them within a short period of time, he believed that based on his talent, even if the amount of time he used was shorter compared to his opponents, the amount of insights he would gain wouldn't be any weaker compared to his opponents. This continued until Gu Lufeng discovered that there was still a young man standing in front of the first row of stone monuments. His eyes involuntarily flashed with a resplendent sharpness as a ripple appeared in his calm heart. However, he quickly regained his composure and continued to focus on doing his best. This was Gu Liufeng's personality. Wasn't Qin Wentian also taking a risk? If he remained in front of the first row of stone monuments, there was a high possibility that he would be left far behind by the others and be eliminated. There's no such thing as perfection. It all depends on which path you choose to walk. Qin Wentian's thoughts were very simple. The resplendent runic light within the monument contained an energy that he desperately needed. Since he didn't even manage to consume it, what's the point of digesting the rest? He hoped that he would be able to use this monument to truly improve himself. Even if he were to be eliminated, he wouldn't regret his choice. Basically, no one is paying attention to his existence. A few young men from the heaven-holding sect of the northern region gathered together. One of them had a mocking expression on his face as he stared at the silhouette of Qin Wentian. His eyes flickered with disdain as he stared at the silhouette of Qin Wentian. This mocking voice caused many in the surroundings to laugh. It was unknown if they were jealous that Qin Wentian had two peerless beauties by his side, or jealous that Qin Wentian was lucky enough to enter the final round. While they were all excluded, everyone can see that those who stepped onto the stone monuments have accomplished something that none of us here have. Yet there are still people who dare to slander them. They are clearly slapping their own faces, yet they are still so pleased with themselves. Yi Lingshuang's group was not too far away from them. When they heard the other party slandering Qin Wentian, they naturally felt indignant in their hearts. The people from the Heavenhold sect turned their gazes over to Yi Lingshuang as cold light flickered in their eyes. They could also be considered a major sect, but right now, not a single person from the Heavenhold sect remained behind. This caused them to feel extremely uncomfortable in their hearts. However, the people from the Heavenhold sect weren't the kind-hearted type. Hence, the people from the Heavenhold sect merely snorted coldly and didn't say anything. However, someone from another group of people had a cold glint in his eyes as he stared at Yi Lingshuang. A mocking voice rang out. Qin Wentian's luck with women is simply too good. Lin Xian from the Celestial Maiden sect, Lu Bingyu from the Battle Sword sect, and now there are two more beauties here. Why is this beauty so anxious to explain herself? Could there be some unspeakable secrets hidden in the shadows? As the sound of this voice faded, many in the crowd laughed out loud. Earlier, the person from the Heavenhold sect glanced over and saw that there were quite a few people in the crowd who spoke. His confidence was instantly boosted as he stared at Yi Lingshuang and Yunmingyi. The figures of these two beauties are truly fiery hot. That Qin Wentian truly makes one envious. The eyes of the person who spoke earlier flashed with a cold light. They were from the Supreme D clan, and had witnessed the conflict between the two of them. Now that they were intentionally provoking them, it was evident that they had a motive. You guys are courting death. How could Ouyang Quangxing endure the filthy words of these people? Lightning and fire flashed around him, causing expressions of interest to appear on the faces of the people in the surroundings, as though they were watching a show. Similarly, their cultivation bases were all suppressed. However, the people from the Supreme D clan in addition to the people from the Heavenhold sect had the advantage in terms of numbers, having 2 more people than their opponents. Are we courting death? The people from the Supreme D clan coldly laughed as a cold intent gushed forth from them. These 2 beauties are so alluring. How can I bear to die? There were people who recognized the people from the Supreme D clan, as an expression of understanding appeared on their faces. So it turned out that they were intentionally provoking them. The news of Qin Wentian killing Di Shi's younger brother had already spread far and wide, causing many to know of the name, Qin Wentian. And indeed, Ouyang Quangxing and the others couldn't endure it any longer. Instantly, an intense battle erupted. As for in another direction, below the stone monument, Qin Wentian's will was still fused with the monument, calmly comprehending it. He didn't try to invade the stone monuments of others, choosing to silently comprehend the incantation. The golden-winged great rock he had transformed into grew increasingly resplendent as golden light illuminated the skies. His entire body exuded an aura of sharpness. This incantation is truly powerful. It's in no way weaker than the 9 ultimate arts of Grand Xia. Complementing it with the 3rd level of the Fiend Transformation Art, I would definitely be able to unleash an overwhelming might. Sadly, I'm not proficient in the mandate of metal and wind, or else the might of this incantation would be even stronger. Qin Wentian mused. Within the stone monument, Qin Wentian's golden-winged great rock soared through the skies, resembling a golden bolt of lightning. This further strengthened Qin Wentian's resolve to continue forward. These stone monuments were true treasures, and there was a high possibility that the master of the immortal martial realm, who was able to leave behind such a bountiful treasure trove, was none other than a legendary immortal. Qin Wentian wanted to cultivate in peace and not be disturbed by others, but this was clearly impossible. At this moment, another person invaded his stone monument. On a stone monument that was 2 steps away from Qin Wentian, a resplendent beam of light shone onto Qin Wentian's stone monument, instantly forming into a diagram. After the battle with Qin Wentian, nobody was able to see how far Qin Wentian's cultivation had progressed. At this moment, within the diagram, Qin Wentian's golden-winged great rock shone with an increasingly resplendent golden light, as its sharp eyes stared at the incoming silhouette. This person was clad in a blazing armor, with a pair of resplendent wings on her back. She was none other than an extremely beautiful maiden, akin to a blazing sun. Princess Jiaoyang of the Guangzhou Empire has found Qin Wentian. This time around, that Qin Wentian who has been hiding at the very back should be eliminated as well. Beauties would always attract the attention of others. This was especially so for someone with Princess Jiaoyang's status and strength. Her fame in the Guangzhou Empire was like the sun in the midday sky. There was no one who didn't know of her. Shang Tong of the Grand Shang Empire has also been found by someone. How interesting, it's Ji Lufeng. I'm afraid Shang Tong is going to be in for a tragedy. The spectators saw another scene. Ji Lufeng was preparing to act. Lin Xian has been targeted by Qi Lian of the Blood Devil Palace. Seems like all 3 battles will erupt at the same time. Lin Xian's path in the immortal martial realm has come to an end. The spectators saw yet another heavyweight battle. It wasn't that they looked down on Lin Xian's strength. In truth, in the battle earlier, Lin Xian had also defeated one of her opponents. But now, her opponent was Qi Lian of the Blood Devil Palace. Qi Lian of the Blood Devil Palace was not only a disciple of the Blood Devil Palace, he was also a descendant of the Qi clan of the Western Domain, one of the 8 era-suppressing geniuses. Although Lin Xian was outstanding, against such an opponent, she would undoubtedly lose. Princess Jiaoyang and Qin Wentian stared at each other. Although Qin Wentian remained at the first monument, Princess Jiaoyang wouldn't underestimate Qin Wentian. She understood that Qin Wentian, who had already won a battle, had the qualifications to continue advancing forward. Yet he chose to remain at his original location. This in itself required courage, and at the very least, she didn't have the courage to do so. However, although she admired Qin Wentian's courage, she still chose Qin Wentian as her opponent. From her point of view, the remaining participants were all extremely famous. Most probably, only Qin Wentian's fame was slightly weaker. Busy. Princess Jiao Yang's silhouette flickered. Her wings flickered as she bathed in the fiery light, resembling a miniature sun. Wielding a sharp sword in her hands, she fused together with the sword. This sword strike of hers was as dazzling as the sun. This was the power Princess Jiao Yang had comprehended from the first monument. Qin Wentian also moved. His golden-winged rock form actually retreated into the air before diving downwards. His lofty eyes shone with an unexcelled aura, akin to a true golden-winged rock, wanting to annihilate everything in its path. The light radiating from the two of them caused the spectators to not dare to look directly at them. Instantly, the gazes of the spectators from the other battlefields were drawn over. After which, they saw Qin Wentian, who had been cultivating at the first monument, flying past Princess Jiao Yang. In the eyes of the spectators, only a resplendent golden light could be seen. On the other side of the floating bridge, Ouyang Guangxing and the rest were currently fighting against the D clan and the Skyhold sect. As for the spectators who were staring at the stone monument, they were all dumbfounded. Chapter 586. Princess Jiao Yang of the Grand Zhou Empire had an illustrious status and outstanding talent, causing her to be renowned throughout the entire Grand Zhou Empire. Princess Jiao Yang chose to clash against Qin Wentian on the stone monument. And just when everyone thought that Qin Wentian's journey in the immortal martial realm would come to an end here, he actually used a resplendent strike to tell everyone that in this world, there would always be some existences who weren't born so dazzling. But at some point in time, the radiance they radiated would cause even the heavens chosen to lose their luster. At that time, only then would he truly be recognized by everyone, and gradually step onto the stage of history. The current Qin Wentian caused the hearts of the spectators to involuntarily tremble. Would he become such an existence? From a nameless and unknown commoner, stepping onto the dazzling stage of the royal sacred region, creating an era that belonged solely to him. Maybe he would. Those from the Heavenhold sect and the Supreme D clan who were in the midst of battle saw the spectators collectively gasping in shock. Their gazes turned over, only to see Princess Jiao Yang being forced out of the stone monument, while the person she chose to battle against, Qin Wentian, was still standing firmly in front of the first row of stone monuments. Although he had already defeated two opponents, he still had no intentions of advancing forward. Princess Jiao Yang coughed out blood as her countenance paled. She stared dumbfoundedly at the young silhouette in front of her. Even now, she still hadn't recovered from the shock. That resplendent strike earlier, what was going on? Princess Jiao Yang's heart was still pounding unceasingly. A hint of desolation could be seen on her sun-like countenance, as a bitter smile appeared on her face. She had thought of many ways she would be eliminated. For example, she would be defeated in an intense battle against a supreme genius, or perhaps she would be defeated in a grand battle against the 8 era-suppressing geniuses. Maybe, she wouldn't be as disappointed as she was right now. She was defeated in the hands of an opponent she had never taken seriously before. Everything about Qin Wentian was foreign to her. She only knew that this young man had extraordinary courage, and had even killed the little ancestor of the D clan. Pung. A light sound rang out as another silhouette was forced back. Only now did Princess Jiao Yang regain her senses as she stared at the person who had just been defeated. After which, a bitter smile could be seen on her face. The Princess of the Grand Zhou Empire and the Prince of the Grand Shang Empire, both of them had actually been defeated together. Their names would no longer be in the top 10 rankings of the immortal martial realm. Shang Tong's countenance was extremely unsightly to behold. He had been defeated. Although he had lost to Ji Lufeng, he still felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart. This was especially so when he discovered that Qin Wentian, who had stopped at the first stone monument, was still standing there. The rage in his heart grew even more intense, and he had no idea that Qin Wentian, who was still at the first stone monument, had already defeated Princess Jiaoyang, who was beside him. How ironic, a person hiding at the back. If I had known earlier, I would have eliminated him from the competition. Shang Tong spoke in a light voice as he turned his head to glance at Princess Jiaoyang, a mocking smile on his face. Although Shang Tong's words weren't intentional, Princess Jiaoyang's countenance abruptly changed. Shang Tong's words, as well as his mocking gaze, seemed to be directed at Qin Wentian. But wasn't he also mocking her as well? One must know that the person Shang Tong was mocking was none other than the person who had defeated her earlier. Since you've already been eliminated, what qualifications do you have to comment on others? Princess Jiaoyang coldly snorted as she flicked her sleeves and departed. Her actions caused Shang Tong to be stunned as flames of anger burned in his heart. He felt that staying here was extremely shameful. Turning, Shang Tong's silhouette flickered as he flew towards the direction of the floating bridge. Just as he was about to leave, Lin Xian was also defeated by Qi Lian. This didn't exceed the expectations of the crowd. Although Lin Xian was strong, the 8 era-suppressing geniuses were all able to pass the test. Regardless of Ji Feixue or Qi Lian, both of them didn't disappoint the crowd. On the floating bridge, Shang Tong descended, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Instantly, those who were staring at him all averted their gazes. Although Shang Tong had been defeated, to them whose cultivation bases were suppressed, Shang Tong was still in existence they couldn't contend against. Right now, Shang Tong was probably still in a state of rage. It was best not to antagonize him. Shang Tong soon discovered that there were actually people fighting on the floating bridge. Especially so when he saw Yi Lingshuang. A cold light akin to the edge of a blade flickered in his eyes. Yi Lingshuang, the daughter of the human emperor of Yi. She was the same as Ji Feixue and Qin Wentian, a disciple of the battle sword sect. Shang Tong thought back to the arrogance of the battle sword sect back then in Xianqing City. He coldly spoke, "The people of the battle sword sect truly think highly of themselves, stirring up trouble everywhere they go." Yi Lingshuang clashed with an expert from the Supreme D clan before they separated. After which, she coldly snorted when she saw the targeting in Shang Tong's eyes. However, she didn't refute him. After all, they were currently at a disadvantage. She didn't wish to make enemies out of them. Shang Tong coldly spoke when he saw Yi Lingshuang ignoring him. Back then, Yi Qingyun was also the top ranker of the immortal martial realm. But now, other than his daughter being somewhat beautiful, she doesn't even have any backbone. As for his other sons, all of them are trash. Yi Qingyun can be considered to have no qualified successors. You were defeated and eliminated by others, yet you still want to flaunt your might in front of us? How ridiculous. How could Yi Lingshuang endure the repeated provocations of Shang Tong? The coldness in Shang Tong's eyes grew even more intense. He stared at Yi Lingshuang as he took a step forward. A vast pressure bore down on Yi Lingshuang, causing her to be forced backwards. Shang Tong floated in the air, staring down at Yi Lingshuang as he icily spoke. "Even if you were defeated by Ji Feixue, you have no right to speak. Even if you are Yi Qingyun's daughter, I still have to discipline you on his behalf." As the sound of his voice faded, Shang Tong's palm trembled as a golden palm imprint abruptly slammed into Yi Lingshuang. Yi Lingshuang was flung through the air as she violently slammed into the ground, coughing out fresh blood as her robes were in disarray. Those from the Heavenhold sect and Supreme D clan rushed over, the smiles on their faces growing colder and colder. Earlier, although they were able to suppress Shang Tong, the fact that they couldn't defeat him even after such a long time caused the flames of anger to burn in their hearts. Fan Lu, Ouyang Feng and the others all stepped forward, glaring at Shang Tong with unsightly expressions. Shang Tong's cultivation base wasn't suppressed. It would be extremely easy for him to kill them. How fucking shameless. Fan Lu spat. Trash with no upbringing. Shang Tong stepped forward as an immense pressure enveloped everyone. Another palm imprint blasted out. Fan Lu and the others had no way to resist and were all flung through the air. At this moment, Shang Tong was already suppressing his anger. How could he allow Fan Lu and the others to refute him? Deal with them however you want. Shang Tong glanced at those from the Heavenhold sect and Supreme D clan as he coldly spoke. Those from the Supreme D clan and Heavenhold sect were extremely unhappy with Shang Tong's tone. After all, they were all extraordinary characters. It was just that their cultivation bases were suppressed. The arrogant look on Shang Tong's face really made them want to give him a good beating. But luckily, Shang Tong had helped them, hence they didn't hold it against him. They continued walking towards Yi Lingshuang and the others, their eyes flickering with a strange light as they stared at the two beauties, Yi Lingshuang and Yunmingyi. An imperceptible coldness bore down on them. Turning their heads, they saw Princess Jiaoyang coldly glaring at them. After which, Princess Jiaoyang glanced at Shang Tong as she emotionlessly spoke. How dare you all bully those whose cultivation bases are suppressed? When those from the Battle Sword sect return, wouldn't you all be seeking your own humiliation? Evidently, although the arrogant Princess Jiaoyang had been defeated, she still felt contempt for Shang Tong's actions. Shang Tong coldly snorted. Although he understood that his actions were somewhat inappropriate, he wouldn't admit to it. At this moment, another silhouette arrived, attracting the attention of many. It was none other than Lin Xian. The Crown Prince of Grand Shang Empire, Shang Tong, is actually such a character. Lin Xian's eyes flickered with coldness, evidently looking down on Shang Tong. This caused Shang Tong to clench his fists tightly. How could he not be enraged when two beauties stared at him with disdain? His countenance turned exceptionally ugly to behold. When I, Shang Tong, do things, I will do as I please. Why would I need others to tell me what to do? After speaking, he actually walked towards Yi Lingshuang and the others, as killing intent gushed forth from him. Princess Jiaoyang turned her gaze over as the contempt in her eyes grew even more intense. Although she looked down on Shang Tong's actions, she couldn't be bothered to interfere in such matters. After all, this had nothing to do with her. I really can't stand the sight of this today. A cold killing intent gushed forth from Lin Xian as she lunged towards Shang Tong. Such a scene caused expressions of interest to appear on the faces of the spectators. Shang Tong inclined his head, as the two of them faced off against each other. However, this battle ultimately didn't occur. The movements of the geniuses in front of the stone monuments seemed to have slowed down. Qin Wentian stayed in front of the first row for a total of 7 days, before he finally moved to the second row. His perception gushed out, and after that, he walked towards one of the stone monuments as his will seeped into it. In the air, astral light flashed as resplendent runic light shone. Over there, a silhouette clad in astral armor stood proudly between the heavens and earth. The runic light from that stone monument frenziedly descended, landing on Qin Wentian. Very swiftly, Qin Wentian's body was also shrouded in a layer of astral light. What sort of energy was contained within this stone monument? Qin Wentian didn't even have the time to cultivate, yet someone already invaded his stone monument, causing Qin Wentian to be speechless. He had never taken the initiative to invade the stone monuments of others before, because he wanted to use more time to comprehend the energy within. He didn't want to waste even the slightest bit of time. When the spectators on the floating bridges saw the silhouette who invaded Qin Wentian's stone monument, they couldn't help but exclaim in shock. In their hearts, they were all thinking that Qin Wentian's trip to the immortal martial realm had finally come to an end. They were wondering how could this person be so patient. And now he finally couldn't endure it any longer and acted against Qin Wentian. Before this, I spared you because I knew I wouldn't be able to kill you in here. Hence, I didn't want to waste my time. But who would have thought that you would still be here? In that case, even if I can't kill you now, I can at least force you to scram out of here. Your life will be spared for now. Di Shi's tyrannical and domineering voice drifted over, containing an undefeatable conviction. That pair of lofty and sharp eyes stared disdainfully at the tiny silhouette of Qin Wentian. Chapter 587. Qin Wentian stared at Di Shi's silhouette, his pitch-black eyes flashing with a hint of wariness. Although he had a deep comprehension of the innate techniques within the first stone monument, he didn't dare to underestimate the era-suppressing genius, Di Shi. Earlier when he entered the second row, he saw Disher standing before the third row. He used 7 days to comprehend 3 of the stone monuments, yet he still couldn't bear to continue forward. Evidently, he also sensed that he needed more time to comprehend the energy within the stone monuments. Since he chose to kill his way here at this moment, he naturally didn't come with good intentions. The astral energy transformed into a golden screen of light, causing Qin Wentian's body to be enveloped in a layer of golden light. His entire body was akin to a great rock, exuding a tyrannical aura. The first stone monument was to allow him to better comprehend the energy within it, allowing him to borrow the unique energy within to transform into a golden-winged great rock. But since he had already separated himself from the first stone monument, it was impossible for him to transform into a great rock. Not only that, he could only use the energy within the stone monuments. He tried to use other methods but discovered that they were all useless. But even if it was just an illusory golden light, Qin Wentian's silhouette still resembled a lofty great rock, exuding an intense sharpness. A demonic wind flickered around Disher, exuding a sinister coldness that unceasingly buffeted Qin Wentian. Busy. The raging wind howled. Disher stepped out towards Qin Wentian in a domineering manner, akin to a true monarch. Stretching out his palms, his fingers were like hooks, grabbing towards Qin Wentian. Instantly, an incomparably fearsome golden claw directly tore through Qin Wentian's body. This claw was incomparably gigantic, akin to the claws of a ferocious bird, capable of tearing humans into pieces. Qin Wentian's entire body shone with a resplendent golden light as he arced through the air in a beautiful arc, directly evading this attack. His speed actually surpassed Disher's. The raging wind howled. Disher's eyes were ice cold as he chased after Qin Wentian. His 5 fingers struck out unceasingly, and in an instant, the terrifying claws of a ferocious bird tore through everything, unceasingly aiming for Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian continued evading. At the same time, his golden wings flapped outwards, seemingly indestructible, unceasingly slicing apart the claws aiming for him. At the same time, his palms slammed out unceasingly as a gigantic claw, even larger than Qin Wentian, wanting to envelop Qin Wentian. However, it was shattered by the golden light Wentian. Qin Wentian's palm. Of Qin. Although that attack wasn't as tyrannical as Disher's claw, Qin Wentian is actually able to defend against Disher's attack. The eyes of the spectators all flashed with similar expressions. Although Qin Wentian was at a disadvantage, relying on his speed to evade as well as his powerful attacks to shatter Disher's pressure, this still caused many to be shocked. Because in terms of single-target attacks, Qin Wentian's attacks were clearly stronger than Disher's. How could this not cause the spectators to be shocked? After a short exchange, Qin Wentian already knew where his advantage lay. Facing against Disher's frenzied attacks, he actually used his speed and attack advantage to counterattack. He no longer retreated, but instead directly attacked in Disher's direction. One after another, the gigantic claws of the ferocious bird were shattered by Qin Wentian's attacks. Qin Wentian's body unceasingly pressed closer to Disher. Such a battle situation caused many to have strange expressions on their faces. Qin Wentian was facing against one of the 8 era-suppressing geniuses, Disher, yet he actually counterattacked? As expected of Disher, he comprehended 3 different innate techniques within 7 days, and he could even cultivate both his attack and speed innate techniques to such a level. He truly isn't someone ordinary people can compare to. It's just that that fellow only comprehended a single type of energy within 7 days, causing his attack to be able to dominate any of Disher's individual techniques. If it was me instead of Disher, I'm afraid I would have been defeated by that fellow very quickly. Lin Xian stared at the battlefield as she spoke in a low voice. Princess Jiaoyang, who was not far away, nodded her head in agreement. She was insta-killed by Qin Wentian in a single strike. Disher has comprehended the power of 3 monuments, but he hasn't unleashed his full power yet. Princess Jiaoyang replied to Lin Xian, through the air. In her heart, she was wondering if this fellow who insta-killed him would be able to deal with Disher's attacks. Just when Qin Wentian was about to reach Disher, resplendent runic lights abruptly flashed. Disher's entire body radiated a dazzling light as astral light erupted forth. Disher's body seemed to split into multiple incarnations of Disher, all of them simultaneously unleashing a powerful attack. In that instant, the power of the spatial lacerations blasted towards Qin Wentian, blotting out the skies as their might shook the heavens. It's over. Many in the crowd silently mused when they saw this. Qin Wentian, who was only an inch away from Disher, was also stunned. However, his reaction speed was extremely fast, and he didn't stop his advance. That pair of illusory golden wings arced through the air in a perfect arc, twisting and turning. His control and reaction speed and the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint caused everyone to sigh in admiration. At the same instant, golden light filled the skies, enveloping his body. At the instant the first attack landed on him, the golden rock borrowed the recoil force to soar up into the skies. Pung pung pung. Numerous attacks landed on Qin Wentian, yet it only caused Qin Wentian's speed to increase. The follow-up attacks simply couldn't keep up with the speed of Qin Wentian's rock form. Qin Wentian soared through the air in a beautiful arc, groaning in misery. Even his original body coughed out a mouthful of blood. However, the eyes of his incarnation grew even sharper as he stared at Disher. It seemed like this battle wasn't going to be an easy one. Qin Wentian wasn't so arrogant as to think that he would be invincible just by relying on his comprehension of the first stone monument. Stopping before the first stone monument was already a form of risk in itself. Maybe if he was like Disher from the start, he wouldn't be weaker than Disher. However, this was his own choice, and he didn't regret it. Disher couldn't help but to furrow his brows when he failed to destroy Qin Wentian earlier. After which, he continued pressing towards Qin Wentian, unceasingly unleashing his strongest attacks. However, the already prepared Qin Wentian relied on his advantage in speed and single-target attacks to forcefully fight against Disher. Unless Disher exploded out with an attack as powerful as the one earlier, he wouldn't be able to destroy Qin Wentian. Finally, Disher gave up. He retracted his will, and started to comprehend the energy within the first stone monument. The diagram in the air vanished as the battle between the two returned to a state of silence. Such an ending caused the spectators on the floating bridges to be in an uproar. Disher actually failed to kick Qin Wentian out of the competition. Shang Tong's countenance changed. There was astonishment, heaviness, and reluctance. He was annihilated under Ji Feishue's attack, but Qin Wentian, who was on the same level as Ji Feishue, didn't suffer a crushing defeat. What did this mean? Shang Tong wasn't willing to admit it. Lin Xian's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise, as well as anticipation. Princess Jiaoyang heaved a sigh of relief. Qin Wentian having such an ability would make her feel a little better in her heart, allowing her to accept the crushing defeat she had suffered against Qin Wentian. However, all of this seemed to have nothing to do with that young man. Qin Wentian still didn't launch any attacks. It was as though he had always been like this, silently comprehending the energy within the second stone monument. That was a terrifying energy that could pluck constellations from the heavens. He could see a blurry silhouette in the air, clad in astral armor. Intense runic lights flashed in his palms, as though he was speaking of words, yet also seemed corporeal. He brazenly unleashed an attack that could invade the heavens and destroy the constellations. This type of attack was somewhat similar to the star-seizing palm imprint of the star-seizing manner back then. However, the might of this attack couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. It was also somewhat similar to Disher's earlier claw attack. However, Disher's attack was more demonic and fiendish, while the energy before his eyes was more pure and heavy. It's actually an attack unleashed using the spiritual refinement method. Qin Wentian felt shock in his heart. He had never given up on the cultivation of the spiritual refinement method. This was also the reason why he could easily jump levels to fight against those stronger than him. However, the attack before his eyes had traces of the spiritual refinement method in it. That resplendent runic light condensed in his palms seemed to be formed from divine energy. Although it was similar, it wasn't as profound as the spiritual refinement method. Before each of the stone monuments, the number of geniuses present grew fewer and fewer. Those extremely famous characters were all eliminated one after another, including Qin Wentian's senior apprentice brother Duan Han. As for Gu Lufeng, he had already arrived before the fifth stone monument. The speed at which the geniuses comprehended the stone monument slowed down, as though they had realized something. Or perhaps, they had gained some enlightenment from the battle between Di Shi and Qin Wentian. The 8 era-suppressing geniuses were all still present, as though they were announcing to everyone that they were as outstanding as ever. Only the interlude between Di Shi and Qin Wentian caused the hearts of the geniuses to tremble, causing no one else to continue challenging Qin Wentian. Right now, there were only less than 20 people remaining before the stone monuments. This caused the hearts of those on the floating bridges to pound. Maybe not too long later, the top 10 rankers of the immortal martial realm would be revealed. Most probably, the spectators in the outside world were all waiting with bated breaths, anticipating the arrival of that moment. But regardless of how tranquil the outside world was, all of this had nothing to do with Qin Wentian, who was focused on comprehending his newfound strength. He only knew that his goal was to advance steadily and steadily, increasing his strength. If he was fortunate enough to be the last one remaining, he would naturally be extremely happy. At the very least, he would be able to answer to his brothers who had assisted him in his battles. At the same time, he would also be able to put a smile on the face of that flawless and pure figure, who had been waiting outside the immortal martial realm. 7 days later, Qin Wentian, who had defeated 2 opponents, had no obstructions as he walked towards the 3rd row of stone monuments. This time around he actually chose the stone monument which Di Shi had chosen before. Such a situation undoubtedly caused the eyes of many to widen as they stared at the young man who left a deep impression in their hearts. Right now there were only 12 people remaining before the stone monuments. This young man who fought against Di Shi and didn't lose, as long as 2 more people were eliminated, he would become a dark horse and become one of the top 10 rankers of the immortal martial realm. At this moment, outside the immortal martial realm, that beautiful silhouette whom Qin Wentian had been longing for in his heart was still standing among the crowd from the Medicine Sovereign Valley. Her beautiful countenance was filled with nervousness, and her tender little hands were clenched tightly the moment she saw Qin Wentian's name on the stone monument. Staring at the floating words, she didn't care what Qin Wentian's ranking would be. She only hoped that when he stepped out of the immortal martial realm, he would still be as perfect as before. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.